The fourth session of the Senate in the first regular session of the 17th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Alan Peter Compañero Cayetano will lead the chamber in prayer.
Let us remember in the holy presence of our Lord and God. Lord Father God, as we assemble here today in session and come before you and humble ourselves, we pray for the leaders of our country, from our president to the barangay kagawads. Lord, we pray for wisdom, for obedience to you. We pray, Lord, for unity for our country. We pray that the planners will have a swift, will be able to move swiftly and be able to implement. We pray, Lord, for unity among diversity among the senators and for us all to be able to fulfill our roles. As we pray for the leadership of the whole country, we also pray for the leadership of Congress, of the Senate and the House, as we pray for the right form of government that we are discerning for our people. We lift this up to you in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Senator Cayetano. The Secretary may please call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senator Sangara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Hunasan, Ontiveros, Lacson, Ligada, Pacquiao, Pangilinan po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Subiri, Senate President Pimentel.
With 22 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the third session, Monday, August 1, 2016, and consider the same as approved.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, we would like to acknowledge and greet the birthday celebrant for today, Senator Joel Villanueva. So I move for a 1-minute suspension.
Minute suspension to enable us to greet our colleague. Birthday nga. Session resumed.
Thank you. Mr. President, we'd like to acknowledge some guests in the gallery today. We have the Council of Gumaca, headed by Mayor Erwin Caralian and Vice Mayor Elchor Caralian. Also, we have guests from the Duterte Cayetano Communications team, Andrea Natavio, Sahad Andal, and Ken Simbalan, owner and founder of the Cinemotion of the Duterte campaign, Mr. President. Also, the Commission on Human Rights, Commissioner Chito Gascon is with us. I defend Coalition of Civil Rights, PHRA, CATWAP, and other human rights organizations. University of the Philippines Institute of Human Rights, represented by Attorney Lising. Ateneo Human Rights, represented by Attorney Jamie Reyes and Ms. Claire Lyson. The Balay Rehabilitation Center, NOBAX, Akbayan, Paranaque, Children's Legal Advocacy Network, the World March of Women, Centro, and the students from the Asian Institute of Maritime Studies. We'd like to welcome them, Mr. President.
Welcome to all our guests, especially to the CHR Chairman, Chito Gascon, and to my colleagues in the Duterte Cayetano campaign.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved. Secretary, please read the business.
Bills on first reading. Number 201, an act regulating the sale of motor vehicles in Metro Manila by requiring a proof of parking space or facility for motor vehicle buyers as a prerequisite for the purchase of a motor vehicle and registration with the Land Transportation Office, introduced by Senator Win Gatchalian.
Referred to the Committees on Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship and Public Services.
202, an act requiring business establishments, public and private buildings and offices, parks, public and private schools, streets or alleys, and other places of public congregation to install closed-circuit television cameras as a means to deter the commission of crimes, by Senator Win Gatchalian.
To the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
203, an act requiring the registration of all users of prepaid subscriber identity module SIM cards, by Senator Win Gatchalian.
To the Committees on Public Services and Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship.
204, an act establishing the Philippine Basic Education, Nutrition and Performance Acceleration Program, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, by Senator Win Gatchalian.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Education, Arts and Culture, Ways and Means and Finance.
205, an act providing for the alternative learning system of education for adults, out-of-school youth, members of cultural minorities, indigenous people, and persons with disabilities, by Senator Win Gatchalian.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, Youth, Ways and Means and Finance.
206, an act instituting a program for the mandatory continuing education of teachers in the primary and secondary levels in both public and private schools, and appropriating funds therefore, by Senator Win Gatchalian.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture and Finance.
207, an act expanding the purpose and application of the Special Education Fund, amending for the purpose Section 272 of Republic Act Number 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991, by Senator Win Gatchalian.
To the Committees on Local Government and Education, Arts and Culture.
208, an act to strengthen technical vocational education and training in the Philippines by incorporating apprenticeship and dual training and recognizing the importance of continuous training of the unemployed, and expanding the provision of enterprise-based education and training, by Senator Joel Villanueva.
To the Committees on Labor, Employment and Human Resources Development, Education, Arts and Culture, and Ways and Means.
209, an act declaring the 25th day of August of every year as the National Tech Walk Day, by Senator Joel Villanueva.
To the Committee on Labor, Employment and Human Resources Development.
210, an act providing financial literacy and entrepreneurship programs for workers, by Senator Joel Villanueva.
To the Committees on Labor, Employment and Human Resources Development, Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship and Finance.
211, an act institutionalizing the Philippine Qualifications Framework and establishing the National Coordinating Council for Education, by Senator Joel Villanueva.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, Labor, Employment and Human Resources Development and Finance.
212, an act institutionalizing skills development and providing job opportunities to inmates in detention facilities, appropriating funds therefore in other purposes, Senator Joel Villanueva.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights, Labor, Employment and Human Resources Development, and Finance.
213, an act providing for a revised apprenticeship program, repealing for the purpose Chapters 1 and 2 of Title 2 of Presidential Decree 442 as amended, otherwise known as the Labor Code of the Philippines, Senator Joel Villanueva.
To the Committee on Labor, Employment and Human Resources Development.
214, an act creating the Community Health Worker Education and Training Program, increasing compensation and other benefits for barangay health workers, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Risa Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Local Government, and Finance.
215, an act increasing the maternity leave period to 120 days for female employees, married or unmarried, in the government service and in the private sector, and granting an additional 30 days for solo mothers, amending for this purpose Republic Act 1161 as amended, and for other purposes, by Senator Risa Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, and Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation.
216, an act increasing the penalties for the refusal of hospitals and medical clinics to administer appropriate initial medical treatment and support in emergency or serious cases, amending for the purpose Batas Pambansa Bilang 702, otherwise known as an act prohibiting the demand of deposits or advance payments for the confinement or treatment of patients in hospitals and medical clinics in certain cases as amended by Republic Act 8344 and for other purposes by Senator Risa Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights, Health and Demography, and Ways and Means.
217, an act strengthening the security of tenure of workers in the private sector, amending for the purpose Articles 248, 279, 280, 281, and 288 in introducing new articles 106, 106A, 106B, 106C, 106D, 106E, 280A, and 280B to Presidential Decree number 442 as amended, otherwise known as the Labor Code of the Philippines by Senator Risa Ontiveros.
To the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development.
218, an act banning the use of firecrackers except in designated areas done by professionals by Senator Soto III.
To the Committees on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs and Local Government.
219, an act granting assistance and benefits to the dependents of all members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Philippine National Police, Bureau of Fire Protection, Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, National Bureau of Investigation, Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency, Philippine Coast Guard, and Bureau of Corrections who are killed or permanently incapacitated while in the performance of their duty or by reason of their office or position by Senator Soto III.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, Education, Arts and Culture, Ways and Means, and Finance.
220, an act instituting school nourishment and dietary program to all public elementary school students, providing funds therefore for other purposes by Senator Soto III.
To the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, Health and Demography, Ways and Means, and Finance.
221, an act prohibiting backriders on two-wheeled motorcycles, scooters, and exceptions thereto by Senator Soto III.
To the Committee on Public Services.
222, an act amending Section 150 of Republic Act 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991 by Senator Soto III.
To the Committees on Local Government and Ways and Means.
223, an act amending Section 4 of Republic Act number 8049, otherwise known as an act regulating hazing and other forms of initiation rites in fraternities, sororities, and other organizations, and providing penalties therefor. Senator Soto III.
To the Committees on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs and Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes.
224, isang batas na nagtatakda na ang katawagan ng ating bansa ay Republika ng Pilipinas o sa maikling salita ay Pilipinas. Introduced by Senator Soto III.
To the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture.
225, an act establishing the fiscal regime and revenue sharing arrangement for large-scale metallic mining by Senator Drilon.
To the Committee on Ways and Means and Environment and Natural Resources.
226, an act strengthening the political party system introduced by Senator Drilon.
To the Committees on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation and Finance.
227, an act establishing telecommunications service standards by Senator Drilon.
To the Committee on Public Services.
228, an act institutionalizing and strengthening public-private partnerships and appropriating funds therefor by Senator Drilon.
To the Committees on Public Works, Economic Affairs, Ways and Means, and Finance.
229, an act rationalizing the grant and administration of fiscal incentives and for other purposes by Senator Drilon.
To the Committees on Ways and Means and Economic Affairs.
230, an act prohibiting the establishment of political dynasties by Senator Drilon.
To the Committee on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation.
231, an act revising the Corporation Code of the Philippines by Senator Drilon.
To the Committees on Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship and Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes.
232, an act creating the Department of Housing and Urban Development by Senator Drilon.
To the Committees on Urban Planning, Housing and Resettlement, Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
233, an act exempting from the population and the land area requirements the conversion of a municipality into a component city if it has a locally generated average annual income of at least 250 million pesos, amending for the purpose Section 450 of Republic Act Number 7160 as amended, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991, introduced by Senator Lacson.
To the Committee on Local Government.
234, an act institutionalizing the income classification of provinces, cities, and municipalities and for other purposes by Senator Lacson.
To the Committees on Local Government and Finance.
235, an act amending Republic Act Number 8485 entitled An Act to Promote the Animal Welfare of the Philippines, otherwise known as the Animal Welfare Act of 1998 as amended by Senator Hunasan II.
To the Committee on Agriculture and Food.
236, an act to increase to 5 million pesos the approving authority of the Commission on Audit to restructure or condone the unpaid interests, penalties, and or surcharges on agricultural loans of farmers and fisher folks by Senator Hunasan II.
To the Committee on Agriculture and Food.
237, Agus Pulangi Privatization Exemption Act of 2016 by Senator Hunasan II.
To the Committees on Energy and Government Corporations and Public Enterprises.
238, an act repealing the minimum height requirement for applicants to the Philippine National Police, the Bureau of Fire Protection, and Bureau of Jail Management and Penology by Senator Hunasan II.
To the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
239, an act providing for a total ban on anti-personnel landmines, for other prohibitions or restrictions on the use of landmines, booby traps, and other devices, creating for this purpose a Philippine Coordinating Committee on Landmines and for related purposes by Senator Hunasan II.
To the Committees on National Defense and Security and Finance.
240, an act to give juridical personality to the present Veterans Memorial Medical Center and for other purposes. Senator Honasan II.
To the Committees on Government Corporations and Public Enterprises, Health and Demography, and Finance.
241, an act providing for the direct remittance to the host local government unit of its 40% share of the gross collection derived by the national government from national wealth taxes, amending for the purpose Section 293 of Republic Act Number 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991, by Senator Honasan II.
To the Committees on Local Government and Finance.
242, an act creating the Department of Fisheries, providing for its powers and functions and for other purposes, by Senator Ligarda.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Food, Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
243, an act amending Republic Act Number 8972, otherwise known as the Solo Parents Welfare Act of 2010, providing for additional benefits on basic commodities and for other purposes, by Senator Ligarda.
To the Committees on Women, Children, Family Relations and Gender Equality, Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, and Ways and Means.
244, an act instituting the Magna Carta of Filipino Seafarers, by Senator Ligarda.
To the Committees on Labor, Employment and Human Resources Development and Foreign Relations.
245, an act promoting integrated water resource management in the use of the country's water resources through the rationalization of service areas, provision of incentives for infrastructure development or clean and efficient technologies, and reorganization of the National Water Resources Board, amending for the purpose set in laws and for other purposes, by Senator Ligarda.
To the Committees on Public Services, Public Works, Ways and Means, and Finance.
246, an act providing for a 3,000 peso increase in the monthly pension of war veterans and their dependents, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, by Senator Ligarda.
To the Committees on National Defense and Security and Finance.
247, an act exempting the bank deposits of senior citizens from the 20% withholding tax on interest income, amending for the purpose Republic Act 7432, by Senator Ligarda.
To the Committees on Ways and Means and Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development.
248, an act implementing the right of the people to information on matters of public concern, guaranteed under Section 7, Article 3 of the 1987 Constitution, and the state policy of full public disclosure of all its transactions involving public interest under Section 28, Article 2 of the 1987 Constitution, and for other purposes, by Senator Ligarda.
To the Committees on Public Information and Mass Media, Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
249, an act granting mandatory health coverage to all persons with disability, amending for the purpose Republic Act Number 7277 as amended, otherwise known as the Magna Carta for Persons with Disability, providing funds therefore and for other purposes, by Senator Ligarda.
To the Committees on Health and Demography and Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development.
250, an act providing for a Magna Carta of the Poor, by Senator Ligarda.
To the Committees on Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, Ways and Means, and Finance.
Additional reference to business bills on first reading, Senate Bill Number 251, an act to promote a low-carbon economy establishing for this purpose the emission cap and trade system in the industry sector to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and protect the climate, by Senator Ligarda.
To the Committees on Climate Change, Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship, and Finance.
252, an act regulating the sale of prepaid subscriber identity module SIM cards, providing set penalties for violation thereof and for other purposes, by Senator Lacson.
To the Committees on Public Services, and Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship.
253, an act to amend Articles 180, 183, 184 of Section 2, Chapter 2, Title 4 of Act Number 3815, otherwise known as the Revised Penal Code, as amended by Senator Lacson.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
254, an act granting additional insurance benefits to barangay chairman, providing funds for the payment of its premiums and for other purposes, by Senator Lacson.
To the Committees on Government, Corporations, and Public Enterprises, Local Government, and Finance.
255, an act upgrading the benefits and incentives of barangay tanod members who have rendered at least 1 year of service in the barangay government, by Senator Lacson.
To the Committees on Local Government and Finance.
256, an act instituting reforms in land administration, by Senator Lacson.
To the Committees on Environment and Natural Resources.
257,
Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
257, an act providing for parent support and for other purposes, by Senator Lacson.
To the Committees on Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development, and Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality.
258, an act providing for protection, security, and benefits of whistleblowers and for other purposes, by Senator Lacson.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Finance.
259, an act establishing the Philippine Air Force Academy and appropriating funds therefor, by Senator Lacson.
To the Committees on National Defense and Security, Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance.
260, an act amending Republic Act Number 6963, entitled an act granting special financial assistance benefits to the family or beneficiary of any police or military personnel or fireman killed or permanently incapacitated while in the performance of his duty or by reason of his office or position and for other purposes, by Senator Lacson.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, and Ways and Means.
261, an act declaring the conferment of the doctorate degree as equivalent to entry-level career executive service officer eligibility in the civil service, by Senator Lacson.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, and Education, Arts and Culture.
262, an act condoning unpaid amortizations of lands awarded to comprehensive agrarian reform beneficiaries and for other purposes, by Senator Recto.
To the Committee on Agrarian Reform.
263, an act prioritizing the agricultural sector and the grant of loans by the Land Bank of the Philippines, amending for the purpose Republic Act Number 3844 as amended, by Senator Recto.
To the Committees on Banks, Financial Institutions and Currencies, and Agriculture and Food.
264, an act instituting reforms to further protect and develop micro, small, and medium enterprises, amending for the purpose Executive Order Number 81, otherwise known as the 1986 Revised Charter of the Development Bank of the Philippines, as amended, by Senator Recto.
To the Committees on Government, Corporations, and Public Enterprises, and Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies.
265, an act creating the Philippine Medical Academy, establishing the Philippine Medical Scholarship Program, and appropriating funds therefor, by Senator Recto.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Education, Arts and Culture, Ways and Means, and Finance.
266, an act creating the Special Mass Transit System Support Fund, amending for the purpose Section 7 and 8 of Republic Act Number 8794, otherwise known as the Motor Vehicle Users Charge Act of 2000, by Senator Recto.
To the Committees on Public Works, Ways and Means, and Finance.
267, an act instituting income tax reform for individual and corporate taxpayers, amending for this purpose Sections 24A, 2, 27A, and 35A of the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997 as amended and for other purposes, by Senator Recto.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
268, an act reducing the cost of electricity for national government offices by promoting the development and utilization of solar energy in all government buildings and offices, providing funds therefor and for other purposes, by Senator Recto.
To the Committees on Energy, Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
269, an act requiring internet service providers to deliver a minimum standard for internet connection speed, by Senator Recto.
To the Committees on Public Services and Science and Technology.
270, an act increasing the threshold for certain non-VAT taxpayers, amending for the purpose Sections 109 and 236 of the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997 as amended by Senator Recto.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
271, an act extending the validity period of the driver's license, amending for the purpose Section 23 of Republic Act Number 4136 as amended, by Batas Pambansa Bilang 398, otherwise known as the Land Transportation and Traffic Code, by Senator Recto.
To the Committee on Public Services.
272, an act strengthening Presidential Decree Number 1096, the National Building Code of the Philippines, as amended by mandating a comprehensive nationwide inspection of buildings and imposing stiff penalties against building officials who violate the pertinent provisions of the said code, by Senator Escudero.
To the Committees on Public Works and Local Government.
273, an act penalizing certain acts and imposition of excessive placement fees against overseas Filipino workers, by Senator Escudero.
To the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development.
274, an act amending Republic Act Number 9184, otherwise known as the Government Procurement Reform Act, by Senator Escudero.
To the Committee on Finance.
275, an act providing for a more responsive civil registration system, by Senator Escudero.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
276, an act providing for a Magna Carta of workers in the informal sector, institutionalizing mechanisms for implementation thereof, and amending for the purpose certain provisions of Republic Act Number 7160 and 8282, by Senator Escudero.
To the Committees on Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development, Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development, Ways and Means, and Finance.
277, an act to provide a civil action for a minor injured by exposure to an entertainment product containing material that is harmful to minors, by Senator Escudero.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality.
278, an act to strengthen the Office of the Government Corporate Counsel by redefining, expanding, strengthening, rationalizing, and further professionalizing its organization, upgrading employee benefits, and appropriating funds therefore, by Senator Escudero.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights, Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
279, an act to grant monthly pension to government retirees under RA 1616 who have reached the age of 70 years, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, by Senator Escudero.
To the Committees on Government Corporations and Public Enterprises, Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
280, an act establishing an education trust fund for grantees of GSIS and SSS members and for other purposes, by Senator Escudero.
To the Committees on Government Corporations and Public Enterprises, Education, Arts and Culture, and Ways and Means.
281, an act recognizing and strengthening alternative care of children, providing incentives to agencies providing the same, by Senator Escudero.
To the Committees on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development, and Ways and Means.
282, an act increasing the combat duty payable commission and non-commissioned personnel of the Philippine National Police from the current value they are receiving to 25% of their base pay and providing funds therefore, by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, and Finance.
283, an act providing for security of tenure for all casual and contractual employees of the government who have rendered the prescribed years of service in the national government agencies and the local government units and for other purposes, by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation.
284, an act providing for additional insurance coverage and benefits for all members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Philippine National Police, Bureau of Fire Protection, Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, National Bureau of Investigation, Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency, and Philippine Coast Guard who are killed, wounded, or injured in line of duty, providing funds for the payment of the premiums and for other related purposes, by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on National Defense and Security, Government Corporations and Public Enterprises, Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, and Finance.
285, an act granting educational assistance and benefits to the dependents of all members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Philippine National Police, Bureau and Fire Protection, Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, National Bureau of Investigation, Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency, Philippine Coast Guard, and Bureau of Corrections who are killed or permanently incapacitated while in the performance of their duty or by reason of their office or position, by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, Education, Arts and Culture, Ways and Means, and Finance.
286, an act providing for a cost of living allowance for all employees in the government sector and for other related purposes, by Senator Trillanes IV.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
287, an act establishing the Emergency Management Agency, amending for the purpose of Republic Act number 10121, and for other purposes by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committees on National Defense and Security, Ways and Means, and Finance.
288, an act providing for a Magna Carta for the poor by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committees on Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development, Ways and Means, and Finance.
289, an act providing additional relief to families with dependents, supporting aging parents and disabled persons by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committees on Ways and Means and Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development.
290, an act providing for protection, security, and other benefits for whistleblowers by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Finance.
291, an act prohibiting discrimination against persons on account of ethnic origin and or religious belief by Senator Trillanes D4.
To the Committees on Cultural Communities and Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development.
292, an act ensuring the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances by Senator Pimentel III.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
293, an act declaring a one-time amnesty on estate tax, inclusive of fines, interest, and surcharge penalties, and other additions thereto and for other purposes by Senator Pimentel III.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
294, an act amending Section 84 of Chapter 1, Title 3 of the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997 as amended, and for other purposes by Senator Pimentel III.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
295, an act amending Sections 99B, 100, and 101 of Chapter 2, Title 3, Estate and Donors Taxes of the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997 as amended, and for other purposes by Senator Pimentel III.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
296, an act imposing a uniform tax for excess campaign contributions, amending for this purpose Section 24 of Republic Act number 8424 as amended, otherwise known as the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997 by Senator Pimentel III.
To the Committees on Ways and Means and Electoral Reforms and People's Participation.
297, an act creating 3 additional branches of the Regional Trial Court with seats at Calamba, Laguna in the 4th Judicial Region, amending for the purpose Section 14E of Batas Pambansa 129, otherwise known as the Judiciary Reorganization Act of 1980 as amended, and appropriating funds therefore by Senator Pimentel III.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Finance.
298, an act creating an additional branch of the Regional Trial Court with seat at Iba, Zambales in the 3rd Judicial Region, amending for the purpose Section 14C of Batas Pambansa bilang 129, otherwise known as the Judiciary Reorganization Act of 1980 as amended, and appropriating funds therefore by Senator Pimentel III.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Finance.
299, an act creating 2 additional branches of the Metropolitan Trial Court with seats as Malabon City, Metro Manila, and the National Capital Judicial Region, amending for the purpose Section 27 of Batas Pambansa bilang 129, otherwise known as the Judicial Reorganization Act of 1980 as amended, and appropriating funds therefore by Senator Pimentel III.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Finance.
Senate Bill number 300, an act creating 2 additional branches of the Regional Trial Court with seats at Ormoc, Leyte, in the 8th Judicial Region, amending for the purpose Section 14L of Batas Pambansa bilang 129, otherwise known as the Judiciary Reorganization Act of 1980 as amended, and appropriating funds therefore by Senator Pimentel III.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Finance.
Resolutions, PS Resolution number 59, a resolution directing the appropriate Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the propriety of granting special or emergency powers to the President of the Republic of the Philippines to immediately solve the worsening traffic congestion in Metro Manila and surrounding provinces by Senator Recto.
To the Committees on Public Services and Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes.
60, urging His Excellency President Rodrigo R. Duterte to include bottom-up budgeting allotments in the proposed 2017 and subsequent General Appropriations Act for the purpose of ensuring citizens' participation in the budgeting process and strengthening the institutions and practices of local governance, thus laying a solid foundation for federalism by Senator Risa Hontiveros.
To the Committee on Finance.
61, congratulating and commending Filipino surfer Philmar Alipayo for winning in the West Sumbawa Open Pro Finals 2016 surfing tournament held as last 20th of July 2016 in West Sumbawa, Indonesia by Senator Sonny Angara.
To the Committee on Rules.
62, recognizing and commending Maristela Torres Sunang for winning gold in the women's long jump event in the Kazakhstan Open held last July 4, 2016, and breaking the Philippine record in long jump by Senator Sonny Angara.
Committee on Rules.
63, urging the Senate Committee on Public Service to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the distressing air traffic congestion in Ninoy Aquino International Airport, causing the inconvenience to the travelers, negatively affecting Philippine tourism and huge business losses, with the end view of crafting measures and providing remedy to address the NIA air traffic congestion by Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
To the Committee on Public Services.
64, honoring the 102nd founding anniversary of the Iglesia Ni Cristo and commending the leadership of Cao Eduardo V. Manalo by Senator Subiri.
To the Committee on Rules.
65, recognizing and commending the members of the Philippine delegation to the United Nations Arbitral Tribunal in The Hague for their expert and exemplary work leading to the favorable ruling for the Philippines in its historic case against China over the West Philippine Sea by Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Rules.
66, resolution directing the Senate Committee on Cooperatives and other appropriate Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the failure to comply of the Bureau of Internal Revenue with Republic Act 9520 or the Philippine Cooperative Code of 2008 by imposing unreasonable requirements and the issuance of certificates of tax exemption in favor of cooperatives by Senator Subiri.
To the Committees on Cooperatives and Ways and Means.
67, a resolution urging the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the planned abolition of the People's Credit and Finance Corporation with the end in view of ensuring that government functions are streamlined and effective and efficient services are extended to microfinance institutions by Senator Recto.
To the Committees on Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, and Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies.
69, directing the appropriate committee to inquire and review in aid of legislation the feasibility for banks to accept a national certificate issued by the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, TESDA, as a collateral for business startup finance for inclusive entrepreneurship by Senator Joel Villanueva.
To the Committees on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies, and Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship.
70, urging the Senate Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs to conduct an inquiry in the exercise of the Congress oversight function as regards the reasons for the continued non-implementation of the provisions of RA 8551, otherwise known as the Philippine National Police Reform and Reorganization Act of 1998, particularly on the Internal Affairs Service of the Philippine National Police, with the end goal of enacting the necessary legislative measures to ensure the appointment of a qualified civilian head of the IAS and to strengthen the independence and objectivity of the IAS by Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
And proposed Senate Resolution number 71, commending and congratulating Mighty Sports Philippines for topping the 30th Jones Cup and an 8-game sweep held from July 23 to 31, 2016 in Taipei, Taiwan by Senator Soto de Fer.
To the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, to avail of the privilege hour, Senator Laila de Lima would like to speak on a matter of public interest. So may I recognize that I move that we recognize Senator Laila de Lima.
There is a motion to recognize Senator De Lima to deliver a privileged speech. Any objection? There being none, Senator De Lima is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I just ask for a minute of a suspension to allow my staff to set up the visuals or the PowerPoint.
Minute
Thank you.
suspension. Session is resumed. Senator De Lima has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, my fellow senators, mga minamahal kong kababayan, magandang araw po sa inyong lahat. I feel privileged that I'm the second member, next only to another lady senator, to deliver the privileged speech in this 7th Congress and in this centennial year of the Senate. I just hope that our male counterparts would not take it grudgingly. Mr. President, my dear colleagues, I rise on matters of personal and collective privilege concerning a number of issues that now dominate the news and divide our people. Our nation is in crisis. This crisis is the real and present danger posed by the illegal drug trade overwhelming our national fabric. Drug addiction, drug pushing, and drug-related crimes, including bribery and corruption of our public officials, and the penetration of our institutions by powerful drug syndicates, threaten our government, our people, and our society. Any person undergoing a deep and profound personal crisis defends himself from the threat that brought the crisis into his life. In the same way, the nation must defend itself against the threat of the illegal drug trade lording over every aspect of our everyday lives. For so long, we have been complacent about the magnitude of the problem. We have been indifferent to the number of drug pushers that have invaded our communities. We stayed silent as our impoverished youth succumbed to the promise of temporary escape from their harsh and brutish life in the urban and rural areas and became drug dependents. This was the state of the nation in crisis under the threat of illegal drugs until the overwhelming voice of the people voted to office the anti-drug crusader and mayor of Davao City as President of the Republic, none other than President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. The President carried a clear and distinct, almost one-track message that reverberated in the consciousness of our people. It cascaded down to the smallest communities that are the victims of drug pushers and drug addicts. Finally, it was channeled back to the national level in the form of a resonating mandate that said, yes, Mayor Digong, rid us of this drug menace any which way you can. We are giving you that mandate to clean our city streets of drugs and, if need be, dispose of all drug lords and pushers the best way you see fit, hogtied and lifeless not being an exception. Mr. President, I agree. The nation is confronted with a drug crisis that has been ignored in focus for so many years. The nation must be saved. The people must be defended. War has been declared upon us, and so war must be waged. I am, with President Duterte, every step to the way in his war on drugs. I myself started the war on drugs at the National Bilibid Prison. On December 15, 2014, I personally led the raid on the drug lords' dens and took away their power over the rest of the prisoners. I isolated them in Building 14 of the National Penitentiary. This raid started at different entry points of the prison compound in order to catch the drug lords literally with their pants down. It can be described as systematically executed simultaneous raid on each and every drug lord's luxury cabal. I praise the President's determination to make this campaign the centerpiece of his administration when he essentially said, kahit wala na akong ibang gawin hanggang sa katapusan ng aking termino kung hindi wakasan ang salot ng droga sa bansang ito. I myself continued cleaning up the National Bilibid Prison of drugs in follow-up operations before I resigned as Secretary of Justice. This anti-drug campaign at the Bilibid eventually culminated with Oplan Galugad. Together with this is the confirmation that there is no Shabu laboratory inside the National Penitentiary. Yes, Mr. President, there is no Shabu laboratory inside the Bilibid prison, not even in the tunnels under it. Those who will search the tunnels will get a whiff not to the smell of cooking methamphetamine, but of methane that comes from the human waste of the prisoners above. Sa termino ko lang po bilang Justice Secretary nag-umpisang maglinis sa bilibid. Sa termino ko lang po giniba ang mga mararangyang kubol ng drug lords at naitapon sila sa Building 14, hiwalay sa mga ordinaryong presyo. But of course, all this has been sorely forgotten in the face of a formidable demolition campaign against me in the social media. And this is where I raise the matter of personal privilege. Mr. President, I have been vilified and attacked not only in social media, but also by the President's men as a drug lord coddler and protector. I have been ridiculed and called names in social media. Photos are photoshopped, videos are spliced, lies are manufactured. The magnitude of the propaganda and misinformation is mind-boggling, considering that this is all directed at me. The lies are intended to show me as protector of the beloved drug lords. But the truth is, I was the only Justice Secretary since the 1986 EDSA revolution who dared to eradicate the dominion of the drug lords inside Bilibid. I was put to task by no less than the Speaker of the House as a sitting senator of the same Congress that he leads. According to him, a resolution will be filed for an investigation on my alleged role in the proliferation of drugs inside the National Bilibid Prison. Mr. President, this not only goes against interparliamentary courtesy, where the House of Representatives investigates a specific member of its co-equal Senate. It is an affront to the Senate as an institution committed by none other than the leader of its co-equal body in Congress. But I will not use that time-honored principle as my primary defense. My first defense is common sense. The Speaker of the House promised the investigation of the former Justice Secretary, the Secretary who has been sued and brought to court by the same drug lords subjected to a raid and then secluded inside NBP Building 14. The Speaker intends to investigate me, who, like the President and PNP Chief Bato de la Rosa, also received death threats from drug lords, for my success in isolating them from the rest of the prisoners and for preventing them from further conducting their drug trade operations from within the walls of the National Penitentiary. My defense against the Speaker's call for my investigation in the House is not interparliamentary courtesy. That is your defense, Mr. President, when you defend me as a Senator of the Republic and this Senate as an institution from this blatant break of tradition in courtesy between the two houses, and whenever you decide to demand an end to all this foolishness before it blows up in our faces, as I so respectfully request now, Mr. President. My defense against all this vilification is my untarnished record and reputation as a public servant. Before this demolition job was launched against me, both in the social media and by the Solicitor General. My defense is my selfless dedication as the chairperson of the Commission on Human Rights, as a Secretary of Justice, and now as Senator of the Republic. Unlike the well-oiled social media operation that has been singularly organized to cause my vilification, I have no money. I have no resources. My friends consider it as a blessing that I was elected senator through sheer determination and the generosity of relatives, friends, and supporters. Last Friday, Justice Secretary Vitaliano Aguirre claimed that high-ranking DOJ officials from the previous administration were in the payroll of the NBP drug lords. Secretary Aguirre did not mention any name or my name, but going by the previous statements of the Solicitor General and the Speaker, one does not have to be a genius to guess who he is referring to. I am outraged that he has qualified this matter-of-fact statement with the actual truth, that he has yet to create a task force that will yet conduct an actual investigation on his foregone conclusion that indeed there were payoffs to DOJ officials. Mr. President, this is the Justice Secretary confused about his law school memory on how due process works. Accuse only after you investigate. In so many ways, and in all sense of the phrase, the President's men have stood up the world on its head. It is time to put the world back on its feet. Binaligtad na po nila lahat ng kwento tungkol sa maganda nating nagawa sa DOJ ni wala pa palang investigasyon. But despite this, I'm still giving the Solicitor General, the Speaker, and the Secretary of Justice the benefit of the doubt. It is possible that they are merely being peddled these lies about me by agents of vengeance. Pakiusap ko lang sana ay bago nila paniwalaan ang mga kasinungalingan ng mga nasagasaan ko noon, ay suriin muna nila ang mga karakter at motibasyon ng mga taong ito. Huwag naman sana silang basta-basta na lang humusga at patungan ako ng cardboard at balutin ng packing tape. Mr. President, my only defense is my honor and my integrity. This well-oiled social media operation intends to take that away from me. In the eyes of the people, they have already succeeded to a great extent. They project me as an enemy of this administration, that I am calling for an investigation of drug killings because I am a drug lord cuddler, that I am against the war on drugs because I am protecting the drug trade. I cannot stay silent in the face of all these blatant lies created in the backroom of a media strategy office suite. I will not fall without a fight. I will not go into that good night without nary a whimper, while all these misguided men use the President's war against drugs as their platform to destroy any elected public official who dares question the methods by which this war is waged. I will not surrender my mandate as a senator of the Republic to these unelected and unaccountable personalities whose own motivations in the demolition of my person is highly questionable and utterly despicable. I cannot let these men run this demolition outfit only for them to accomplish their own personal and political agendas, to curry favor with the President, and to get a larger share of the spoils of executive power. Napagsasamantalahan nila ang bawat pagkakataon sa ngalan ng ambisyon at pansariling interes. Hindi natin pwedeng hayaan na magpatuloy ang grupong ito sa hangarin nilang siraan ang lahat ng balakid sa kanilang ambisyon sa kapangyarihan gamit ang kanilang pagkamalapit sa Pangulo ng ating bansa. Ang tanong lang naman nila sa sarili nila ay, what are we in power for? They generate acclamation or foment fear, whichever works for them. Mr. President, they're doing this to a sitting senator. This is not only an attack against me, but against any senator who dares to be outspoken. Pagkatapos ko, sino po ang isusunod sa inyo na mga ahas na tumiwalag sa kanilang marcha, na hindi sasayaw sa kanilang marcha or sa kanilang musika? That is why, ultimately, this is an attack on the Senate as an independent institution. We cannot let anyone use the misfortune of this nation in this drug crisis to advance personal or political agendas. We cannot let anyone use the drug crisis we are now facing to silence all dissenting voices. If we let anyone do this, there will be no single voice left to warn us of our backslide to the depths of barbarity. We do not want a situation where not a single dissenter is left to remind the people that they have just traded the drug crisis with another one, the crisis of our failed humanity as a nation. We cannot go on being indifferent to the daily executions without ultimately becoming a nation bound by a collective sociopathy. The day has already come and we can no longer tell who is morally wrong among us. The 9-year-old street child sniffing rugby, or the policeman who shoots the child in the head for sniffing rugby. This is our descent as a nation into the darkness that these men have created for us. Of course, we must face this drug crisis as a nation. So many have already fallen as victims, both in the number of drug users and in the number of ruined families. Yes, Mr. President, indeed, we must wage this war against drugs. But there must be another way. There has to be another way. There must be a way other than this method that brings us to our collective descent into impunity, fear, and ultimately utter and complete inhumanity. We cannot wage the war against drugs with blood. We will only be trading drug addiction with another more malevolent kind of addiction. And this is the compulsion for more killings that have now included even the innocent. There are now more mistaken identities and collateral damage, and the proportion is rising. And why is the proportion of collateral damage rising? Mr. President, impunity, once unleashed, has no boundaries. It does not care who dies. It does not care who suffers. It does not care who the victims are. Impunity has no sense of right or wrong. It is as amoral as it is immoral. As a human rights advocate and human being, I plead to the government, this administration, and to the President. There must be another way. There has to be another way. We must find another way. I fully support the war on drugs, and I sincerely desire its success. I am one with the President in his relentless and sustained campaign to rid our country of the drug menace. Nais ko lang na ang ating mga pulis at iba pang law enforcement agents ay maging totoong mga alagad ng batas, na sumusunod sila sa batas habang pinaiiral ito, na tumatalima sila sa mga patakaran at pamantayan sa pagsugpo ng krimen at pagdakip sa mga nagkasala, na isinasaalang-alang nila ang pangingibabaw ng batas sa kanilang pagtupad sa tungkulin. And my concern is not only the killings tallied by the PNP as a formal law enforcement agency. At least we can put the PNP to task in our official legislative investigations. My gravest concern lies with the vigilantes of the night now operating almost all over the country. Those harbingers of death spreading the apocalypse of our dehumanization. They match with vigor the killings carried out with the official PNP. And these people we cannot serve with the summons of the Senate. They are faceless. They are unaccountable. The Philippine National Police reported 395 alleged offenders killed in alleged police operations from July 1 to August 1. The daily average is as high as 13 dead during the past 1 month of the current administration. And higher figures are even reported by certain media outlets. And that's now being flashed. Those are now being, the figures are being flashed on the screen. I am not saying that all of the killings are summary executions, but there are telltale signs that several are. A number of complaints were already filed with the Commission on Human Rights. On top of these are the vigilantes carrying out an ersatz kind of justice, cardboard justice. It is reported that as of July 29, 259 human beings were killed in the hands of these assassins, several of them bystanders or victims of mistaken identity. Let's see some specific cases. At late night of July 21, in a Malabon City public cemetery, shot dead were 5, including a mother and her son who were then celebrating his birthday. The unidentified men who sprayed bullets on the group left a cardboard sign that tagged them collectively as drug pushers. The local police, whose outpost stood only about 30 meters from the massacre site, later came up with an incident report linking only 2 and not 5 of the victims to the drug trade. On July 19, an 18-year-old student was just in front of his house in Pangasinan feeding his dog when motorcycle riding gunmen approached him and asked for his father. When he was unable to reply, they just shot him dead. On July 9, anti-drug operations had turned Barangay Purok Islam in Matalam, North Cotabato, into a virtual ghost town as many residents left for their safety. One raid produced 8 deaths. At 2 a.m., heavily armed policemen barged into a house of drug suspects where they were asleep. Some residents claimed that the victims were summarily executed in their bedrooms. A mother of the 2 victims said, I quote, "It was an overkill. My sons were unarmed. We were treated like animals." End of quote. From July 8 to 9, 3 bodies were found separately in Manila with cardboards attached to them saying, "Pusher, hold up for ako, huwag tularan." The first body was found under a bridge in Santa Cruz, the second in front of the Metropolitan Theater, the third in front of a golf course in Bonifacio Drive. Their bodies were wrapped in packing tape and bore stab wounds. On July 6, 2 women and a man were found dead at an irrigation canal in Llanera, Nueva Ecija. They were found floating in the waterway, blindfolded and hog-tied. They were claimed to be part of the municipal drug watch list. At around 3 in the morning of July 5 in Muntinlupa City, 2 brothers were killed by the police. They were on their way to a hospital for a medical exam following their arrest when they allegedly tried to grab the gun of their police escort, while their mother admitted that his older son was a small-time drug pusher. Her younger son was innocent and was never involved in illegal drugs. On July 3, 5 men were shot dead in what the police said was a follow-up anti-drug operation in the Golden Mosque compound in Quiapo, Manila. The wife of one of the 5 deceased claimed there was no shootout. My husband was only trying to fix our water supply that morning when he was shot. He was unarmed, the wife explained. We are so poor that we can barely afford to buy food. How can we even buy a gun? And so the gore fest continues. The fact that our attention span has waned, as I enumerated, only a fraction of these killings already shows how desensitized we have grown to the killings as mere numbers and statistics. We now casually eat our breakfast watching human beings wrapped in packing tape or lying in pools of blood. Sa araw-araw na lang po na ginawa ng Diyos mula nang maging malinaw ang resulta ng nakaraang eleksyon, nasanay na tayo ng ating almusal ay suman na bangkay at dinuguan. We must force ourselves to be reminded that the victims are always flesh and blood to their families and loved ones. Hindi po sila suman o dinuguan. The killings have become so common, the mass media settled for fill-in-the-blank template news reports, differing only in the place, time, and name of the victim, if the victim even has a name. The what and the how remain the same. News write-ups carry the standard explanation for cardboard justice. But how are we exactly to know if the killings were simply cover-ups for the involvement of members of the police in the drug trade, or just simple cases of personal vendetta? Mr. President, truth now in this country are lines of acrylic marker on a cardboard. Kahit ano na lang isulat sa cardboard ay pinapaniwalaan ng kaagad. This is just a variation of the meme in social media. Get a photo, get a cardboard, write words, and the people will believe anything. Both the vigilantes and the social media operators take this nation as a nation of meme believers. Tama na po ang mga meme. Tama na po ang cardboard. Mas malalim po ang katotohanan. While the social media operators introduce to us DIY, do-it-yourself, truth, the vigilantes have introduced to us DIY justice. Never mind the police investigation, never mind the public prosecutor, never mind the courts and the judges. This is do-it-yourself justice at work. All you need is an acrylic marker, a cardboard, some packing tape, and of course, something to stab or shoot the victim with. And there is no filing fee. As for the killings carried out supposedly in pursuit of police work, there is a usual explanation that the executions were done in the course of legitimate law enforcement operations. Nanlaban daw, nakipagbarilan daw, nang agaw daw ng baril habang nakaposas. Pero alam naman po natin na minsan ay style bulok na yang mga paliwanag na yan. We are aware of incidents of police rob-outs. We know about the shortcuts taken by some law enforcers in the guise of self-defense. The use of force, it appears in some cases, may not be necessary, or if necessary, was not proportional. We still have a system of law that processes and punishes wrongdoers. We have our Bill of Rights that accorded the right to be presumed innocent. What is worrisome in this situation is that the war on drugs is becoming a convenient pretext for misguided or utterly corrupt law enforcers to kill just anyone. Ang magagandang layunin ng gyera laban sa droga ay nasisira nitong mga karumal-dumal na pagpatay. Tandaan sana natin na ang pagpatay na walang katwiran at walang legal na basehan ay krimeng malinaw. Ito ay illegal. Ito ay immoral. I must admit, the public reaction to these executions is not in favor of those who oppose it. A 91% approval rating for the president and what he stands for is a formidable record. But we cannot base our reactions to these killings on the popularity of the president. Popular or not, murder must stop. S-T-O-P. Stop. Stop the killings now. There might not be a manifest public outcry, but there is definitely a seething undercurrent of remonstration against the disregard for human life. Students armed with nothing but courage and conviction have started to act. They are protesting with cardboards on their chests, telling us that no one is safe. If these students who do not have the protection of position or power raise their voice against these daily assassinations and rob-outs, what does that make of me, an elected senator, if I keep silent? Last Friday, the Ateneo de Manila University, through its president, Father Jet Villarin, issued a statement condemning the nation's acceptance of these killings as the new normal. Before that, De La Salle University President, Brother Jose Marie Jimenez, urged the Lasallian community in a pastoral letter to make a stand against the culture of death. Ateneo has reason to cry. Its math teacher, Emmanuel Jose Pavia, was killed while on his way home. The motive for his murder is lost in the hundreds of street assassinations now taking place. Impunity, once unleashed, has no limits. It simply does not care about the nuances of who gets killed and why. The message is this: let us not wait until another Atenean on his way home is killed. Let us not wait until a Lasallian is killed. Let us not wait until another student or teacher from any other school or a worker or commuter or motorist is killed. The statement of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines reminds us that the murder of drug suspects is still murder under the rule of law. My own former office, the Commission on Human Rights, led by Chairperson Chito Gascon, has already taken steps to investigate cases of mistaken identity and collateral damage, aside from cases where families of drug suspects had courage enough to file complaints. The relatives of the collateral damage victims are the indignant voices that tell us of the extent this bloody purge has spilled over to the innocent commuter and ordinary civilian. The Sunday before the State of the Nation address, the Inquirer's headline was God's fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill. The church is speaking to us. Quote, human life is sacred because from its beginning it involves the creative action of God, and it remains forever in a special relationship with the Creator, who is its sole end. God alone is the Lord of life from its beginning until its end. No one can, under any circumstance, claim for himself the right directly to destroy an innocent human being. End of quote. Mr. President, these are the voices trying to wake up a person sound asleep while his house is burning. But he is in a hallucinating dream of a country's redemption by bloodletting. It is just that the fire has not yet seared his flesh, the blood has not yet reached his doorsteps. The Roman poet Dante said, quote, the hottest place in hell is reserved to those who in times of moral crisis refuse to take a stand. End of quote. If we are to shirk from our natural, moral, and legal duty to condemn the abuses of power, to condemn any and all wrongdoings, the victims of our silence are not only the summarily killed, but values that are sacred and universal. The very right to life, the rule of law, due process, and justice for all. Mr. President, drugs destroy lives, but we need not destroy lives to destroy drugs. Ang paggalang sa buhay ay hindi balakid sa pagsukpo ng droga at mga krimen. May mga paraan at mekanismo sa ilalim ng ating mga batas upang maisagawa ang gyera laban sa droga habang itinataguyod ang pangingibabaw ng batas at pag-iral ng karapatang pantao. Our legal arsenal is equipped. It should simply be strengthened to carry out the objectives of this war on drugs. The war on drugs can be waged without sacrificing the sacredness of life, obedience to the rule of law, and adherence to human rights. Freddy Aguilar once sang, higit sa lahat ay tao. And this is the biggest truth. Higit sa lahat ay tao, higit sa lahat ay buhay. The right to life is the most ancient and most basic of all human rights. It is the source of all human rights. The UN Declaration on Human Rights proclaims that everyone has a right to life, liberty, and security of person. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights declares that every human being has the inherent right to life, and that this right shall be protected by law. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his life. Our Bill of Rights commands that no person shall be deprived of life without due process of law. Section 11 of Article 2 of our Constitution proclaims that a state values the dignity of every human person and guarantees full respect for human rights. The international community declares the inviolability of the right to life of whatever race, color, creed, religion, age, status, gender, or circumstance. The civilized nations of the world keep watch on any country that shows a disregard for the right to life, especially systemic violations that indicate government inaction or worse, state-sanctioned abuses. We have to show the world that the Philippines continues to stand with the rest of humanity in condemning and putting a stop to any and all forms of systemic and widespread extrajudicial killings, whether perpetrated by the state or by non-state actors. Mr. President, In this light, I filed proposed Senate Resolution number 9, calling for a congressional inquiry in aid of legislation on the spate of extrajudicial killings and summary executions. Ito po ang aking pakay. Palakasin ang gyera laban sa droga at kriminalidad sa pamamagitan ng pagsawata sa mga iligal na pagpatay. Magpanukala ng mga nararapat na batas at alituntunin upang tulungan ang ating kapulisan sa kanilang tamang pagtupad ng tungkulin. At higit sa lahat, palakasin pa ang sistema ng ating mga batas para matiyak ang pag-iral ng batas at paggalang sa karapatang pantao. Malinaw po na ang laban na ito ay hindi lamang pansariling laban ni Laila de Lima. Ito ay laban ng mga karaniwang Pilipino para sa pagbabago, para sa pagyabong ng buhay, para sa kaginhawaan ng pamilya, para sa katiwasayan ng pamayanan, para sa kaayusan ng pamahalaan at para sa kabutihan ng lahat. If this administration is sincerely concerned about the spate of killings of suspected criminals, as it pronounced once before the media, then it should welcome the Senate inquiry. However, even before any Senate resolution was filed, the Solicitor General and the PNP chief have already made pronouncements that they will not attend any Senate inquiry even when invited or summoned. The premature position of some administration officials is regrettable. The bloody drug war advocates are fomenting a hate campaign against those in the media, civil society, the religious and private sectors, and the academe. Despite this hate campaign, we have to continue opposing the murder of the innocents as well as that of the suspects. We must call for the accountability of state actors responsible for this terrifying trend in law enforcement and the investigation of killings perpetrated by the vigilante assassins. In the campaign against criminality, we cannot applaud criminal methods merely because we are left unaffected. Life has more value than an accusation written in a piece of cardboard, whether you are rich or a scum of the earth. Mr. President, needless to say, all lives matter. Katulad po ng pagmamahal ko sa aking dalawang anak at sa dalawa kong apo, mahal ko po ang bayang ito. Katulad po ninyo, mga kapwa ko senador, mga kababayan, mahal ko ang bayang ito. Katulad po ninyo, mahal na Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte, mahal ko po ang bayang ito. Hayaan niyong akong mahalin ang bayan natin sa pamamaraan na naaayon sa aking damdamin at sa aking tungkulin. Hayaan niyo akong maging boses ng mga hampaslupang walang kapangyarihan dahil marami na sa atin ang boses ng mga nasa kapangyarihan. It is the powerless and the helpless who most need our love and protection, not the powerful. My fellow senators, Mr. President, that is what we are in power for. Kaya po tayo binigyan ng kapangyarihan bilang mga senador para mahalin ang mga walang kapangyarihan at tulungan sila na sagipin ang kanilang sarili mula man sa pag-abuso ng droga o sa pangkalahatang paghihirap sa buhay. Ang ating kapangyarihan ay para sa mga walang kapangyarihan. Ang ating pag-aruga ay para sa mga nangangailangan ng ating tulong at pag-unawa. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Thank you.
Majority Leader,
Mr. President.
Senator Cayetano is recognized.
Mr. President, will the lady yield to some questions?
Mr. President, I believe that a privileged speaker has also the privilege to decline an interpellation. Precisely as a privileged speech is not a sponsorship of any bill or resolution. So I respectfully decline. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker,
Senator
Mr.
Cayetano.
President, it is indeed the right of any senator or speaker to decline. but traditionally, I think in my 18 years in Congress, this is only the third time that someone who gave a privileged speech declined. Having said that, I want to welcome our able lawyer, the lawyer of our Senate President and my lawyer to the Senate, former Justice Secretary and now Senator De Lima. Since she will not yield to some questions, I ask for a few minutes to rise on a question of personal and collective privilege.
There is a motion to recognize Senator Cayetano to speak on a matter of personal privilege. Is there any objection? There being none, Senator Cayetano is recognized. Please proceed, sir.
Mr. President, the good senator and former Justice Secretary talked about a new normal. Before we go to that point, let us go to the old normal. I don't live in a subdivision, just like President Duterte. I live in 209 Pasong Calabao Street, Bagumbayan, Taguig. So whatever our tricycle drivers, our vendors, kapitbahay namin, simbahan ng may Christian church, may Iglesia ni Cristo. So yung nangyayari sa kalye, nararamdaman namin mag-asawa. Of course, we're more privileged to have our security. My wife is the mayor of our city. But we do feel what is happening. Dati po, walang magawa ang tao sa pusher. Pag ang pusher na nampal ng tricycle driver, ang pusher na sa patay, sasampalin yung nandun sa monte o sakla o terembe, kung ang pusher may bodyguard pa na pulis, wala rin silang magawa kung ang isang ale na alas 5 ng umaga nagra-rush papasok ay bastusin ng mga halos tulog na dahil lasing pero nakadroga din sa kalye. Wala din pong magawa ang tao pag binabastos sila midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, umiilag na lang or magte-text kahit natulog na yung tatay, tulog na yung asawa, gigisingin para sunduin lang yung anak. Minsan, hindi pa papasukin pagka late ang activities sapagkat the reality is there was no security. Walang safety sa bahay. No? And every now and then, in any barangay you go to in Metro Manila and many highly urbanized cities around the country, magigising ka na lang kasi may ninakawan, bulong-bulungan na ni-rape. Pag nalaman ko sino, kapatid, nag-rape sa kapatid. Tiyuhin, ni-rape yung pamangkin. Yung isang halos pamilya o inampon nila bilang pamilya na 20 years na nasa bahay nila, ni-rape ang kanilang anak. That was the normal. In our city, we tried to do something about it. When I was still a bachelor, ginising ako dahil may pulis, sinampal yung tricycle driver. Pinahabol ko. Nalaman ko na yung pulis na yon, paikot-ikot lang. Pag drug test sa Muntinlupa, lilipat sila ng Parañaque. Pag nag-drug test sa Parañaque, lilipat ng Pasig. Drug test sa Pasig, lilipat ng Makati. Ito, small time lang sa baba na pusher. Pero marami ding customer, user din. Madaling sabi po, napakulong. Alam mo yung barangay captain, kahit unconstitutional, pinatawag lahat ng pusher sa barangay. Full force dumating. Katulad sa nangyayari ngayon na nag-surrender. Pinapirma niya, unconstitutional, pero pinapirma niya na hindi na sila magbebenta. Pirmahan sila. 1 month later po, nakawala, nakapiansa yung pulis. Umikot, kasama ng may M16 siyang dala, may mga kasama siya, siguro 100, 200 feet away from our house. Umikot-ikot, sinasabi, sinong batang congressman na yan? Kung yung mga dati, hindi ako natigil, yan pa kaya. Alam mo, pinatawag nung kapitan, yung mga pusher, wala na pong pumunta. Several years later, a decade later, my wife became mayor. May hinuli na pusher. In family name, 7 others with the same family name nahuli before. 5, 6, 7. NBI, PIDEA, lahat napakawalan at different stage. So nung nahuli to, ang sabi niya, pag hindi niyo ako pinakawalan, in 1 week tanggal kayo. In 1 week, nire-relieve yung opisyal na nakahuli sa kanya. Ako mismo tumawag sa Southern Police District. Sabi, sir, prino-promote namin. Ay, kung saan nyo nilalagay? Hindi makasagot. General, di ako pinanganak kahapon. Huwag nyo kaming lolokohin. yung mismong pusher nagsabi na ipalilipat siya. Alam mo sabi ng general? Sir, yung tumawag sa akin, meron siya judiciary, meron pong general, meron pong legislature. But just like the good Justice Secretariat and now our colleague, I believe in life. Regalo ng Panginoon ang buhay ng bawat isa, valuable. I think I'm one of the few politicians who have projects in many jails. Together with Brother Joel Villanueva, kapwa natin senador and birthday celebrant today, nagtayo kami ng computer school sa Taguig City Jail, sa Metro Manila Integrated Jail at Cebu City Jail. Sir President, 40 to 60% na nakakulong doon, drug-related. What is my point? Yung point po nung araw, ang pusher hindi mahuli. Pag nahuli, napakawalan. Pag ang pulis hindi pumayag pakawalan, pakakawalan ng piskal. Kung yung piskal at pulis mabuti at hindi pinakawalan, yung judge papakawalan. Kung yung judge, piskal, at saka yung pulis mabuti, makakawala sa kulungan. Pagka nakulong sa National Penitentiary, may jacuzzi, pwede magdala ng babae at lalaki, may banda, may aircon. Kaya mga kaibigan ko sa abroad, nasabi ang Pilipinas, hindi nakakapagsabayan sa mga 5-6 star. Sabi ko, hindi totoo yun, ha? Ang aming penitentiary, 5-star. Kami lang ata may ganun sa buong mundo. And to give credit to our colleague, ilang beses niya ni-raid and ilang beses na sinubukan niya, no? If the problem was too big for the Aquino administration and the secretary, siya mismo po nagsabi kanina, it was just too big, no? But this president that you supported, Mr. President, that I supported, took it on. Sabi niya, titignan ko sa mata ang mga pusher na to at hindi ko sila aatrasan. Never ko po narinig sa kanya na sabihin yung walang laban, patayin. I sympathize with the former Justice Secretary and our colleague kung pinagbibintangan siya na wala namang facts. Hindi ko po alam. Pinakinggan ko lang yung sinabi niya. Kung gumagawa ng conclusion na mali, I sympathize with her. At kung attack to sa Senado, hindi dapat. Pero, nung sinabi niya, 7-year-old nagra-rugby, and then sasabihin niya, binaril ng polis, wala pa naman ako nababalitaan na polis na binaril ang 7-year-old na nagra-rugby. Di ba? Yung sabihin 9 years old, etc., no? Hindi ko alam yung circumstance niya. At never sinabi ng ating Pangulo na kapag ka may summary killing or murder ay hindi paparusahan. In fact, ang sinabi niya, patay kayo sa aking mga pulis kayo pag umabuso kayo. At sinabi po niya na palalakasin niya yung internal checks ng police to make sure that not only do they not murder people, but that they're not involved in drugs. Because the reality is, ang PNP mismo ay nagamit din at ginagamit pa rin ng mga pushers. So, our colleague then jumped to conclusions by saying, ganito na karami ang patay sa police operations, pero alam naman natin ng mga police, I have to paraphrase because I didn't write down exactly, but sinasabi niya may rub out din. But isn't that jumping to conclusions? Meron po tayong presumption of regularity. Hindi ko sinasabi na lahat yan regular, pero may presumption. Sabi niya, meron daw dapat presumption of innocence. Eh, hindi ba presumed innocent ang police? Pagka napatay niya yung pusher dahil lumaban, may barel, sa amin po syudad, yung bago namin, hindi pa siya, acting pa lang siya ngayon, hindi pa siya regular na chief of police, pumunta po sa mayor, sa asawa ko, kwento sa amin. Sabi niya, ma'am, pipilitin ko ikulong at hulihin lahat ng pusher, pipilitin ko na walang patay. After a few weeks, pinakamarami kaming huli sa buong Metro Manila, walang patay. And then may napatay na isa. Alam niyo bakit, Mr. President? Naglabas ng granada eh. Anong gagawin mo? Babarilin mo sa kamay, edi pag nabaksak yung granada, patay lahat ng laman ng bahay, pati yung pulis. And then recently, 3. Kasi may mga firearms at makikipagbarilan sa lahat. Sabi nung iba, kailangan proportional. Kopong-kopong pa ho yun. Yung sinasabing proportional, hindi na po yan ang standard sa Japan, sa France, sa Europe, sa UK. Ngayon po, nung araw po, pagka binaril ka, may yung pusher o yung kidnapper may baril, nagbaril ka rin, o barilin mo muna to main. di ba? Main. So, baril mo sa shoulders, baril mo sa hita para dumapa. Hindi na po ganun yun ngayon. Right now, pag bumunot ka laban sa law enforcers, they can shoot and they can shoot to kill. Bakit? Dahil sa panahon po ngayon ng terorismo, sa panahon po ngayon na sabog, at hindi na nasa tamang issue, nasa tamang pag-iisip, ang mga pusher, hindi mo alam kung magpapasabog yon or kung yung M16 niya, bigla na lang babarilin lahat. So ngayon, bago po ang rule. Kailangan pa rin sabihin, mga pulis kami, NBI kami, PDEA kami, ibaba ang gamit. Raid to, o kaya ito'y bypass operation, kailangan mo pa rin magpakilala. You have to give them an opportunity to surrender. Tama po tayo doon. At kung meron kayong mapakita na gano'n ang ginawa, na sumusurrender, at hindi pinayagan sumurrender pero baril, i-charge natin ng murder yung mga pulis. Pero kung wala, at spekulasyon lang yon, kawawa naman po mga pulis. Kung kailan sila may backup ngayon, kung kailan sila hindi kinukulit ng mga general, manghuli kayo, patay kayo sa amin. Kung kailan walang mga mayayaman na pusher ngayon na nagsasabi sa kanila, ang pulis walang abogado, kami may abogado. Marami pong hindi may alam, ang pulis, pagka nasuspinde o kinasuhan, walang sweldo, paano pakakainin ng pamilya? Pero ang pusher, lahat ng abogado pwede niyang i-hire. So, Mr. President, it is good and it is right to stand up and say, hey, hindi pwede vigilante, hindi pwede summary killings, hindi pwedeng murder. It is correct to stand up and say, police, make sure you follow the rules. Pero kung mali, na pagbibintangan mo ang ating dating Justice Secretary ng mali, mali din naman po siguro, pag nagagawan mo ng storya ang mga pulis, nasasabihin mo ngayon summary killings. Bakit po napakarami ng pinapatay ngayon? Actually po, hindi marami, konti pa eh. Kasi po, hindi ko sinasabi na kailangan mas maraming mapatay. Ang sinasabi ko, kailangan matigil ang droga at kailangan po mawala na ang ibang mga pusher. Bakit po? 3 million po ang pusher eh. Ang addict. So sabihin mo na po, sa bawat 1,000 addict, isang pusher. One pusher, 1,000 addicts. So you have 300,000 pushers. Eh ang problema po sa pushers, mahigit kalahati sa kanila, gumagamit din. At mahirap sa gumagamit, marami sa kanila armado. So kung ikaw ay gumagamit, ikaw ay pusher, ikaw ay durog, at bigla kang inanong barel, ang feeling mo, hindi pulis yun. Meron tayo during the campaign, Mr. President, kung alam mo, yung isa, tatay niya ang pinatay niya. Kasi ang nakita daw niya, nung nakasyabu siya, demonyo daw nakita niya. Di niya alam na tatay niya pinapatay niya. Demonyo daw. Sa amin pong twin town, pero yumaon na yung mga tao. Anak na nakadroga, binaril din ang sariling tatay. May katungkulan po yung tatay. That's the reality on the ground. No? So, what did our President say during the inauguration? Sabi niya, Commission on Human Rights, Congress, you do your job, I do mine. Di naman niya sinabi na wag mag-imbestiga ang Commission on Human Rights. Sinasabi niya, pag nag-imbestiga kayo, tama na muna media, ilabas niyo kung may conclusion na kayo. And dami-daming violation nung eleksyon Ang tinignan yung kwento ni Presidente, di ba? Nagkaroon pa sila ng ruling. Samantalang napakaklaro, he was telling a story 20 years ago. They could have come out with a decision that the mayor, we do not agree of how he said it, but this is an incident 20 years ago. So if I tell you a story now that was 20 years ago, and I'm just telling you, sasabihin ngayon ng Commission on Human Rights, I'm politically incorrect at mali ako, etc., ganyan. They did not need to investigate. They just had to look at the President's answer. He was mayor at that time. The same thing that's happening now. We are making conclusions because it is an emotional issue. I do not know the facts about the death of the professor in Ateneo. I hope to God, I pray to God, and if I can do anything to catch the killer, count me in. I am also an Atenean. I heard that there is an element of robbery. Kung rob out yan, kung extrajudicial killing yan, by all means. Pero the way it is being blended and weaved by the media and by some human rights group is as if ito'y utos ng Pangulo at ito'y gusto ng Pangulo. May I direct your attention, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, Mr. President at mga kababayan, to countries where there was a drug war, katulad ng Colombia. Nung nagsimula i-wipe out ang drug cartels, they turned on themselves. Marami sa vigilante killings dito ay siya din galing sa mga drug lords at sa mga drug rings in the area. Kasi sila may hawak ng ebidensya against each other. Sila magkalaban. Mismong sa mga pulis eh. Kung yung pulis, dating protector ng drugs, at dati naman pumapatay, kung ikaw yung pulis na yon, hindi mo unahan, papatayin mo na yung drug lord mo. Kasi baka pag nagsumbong ka pa kay presidente, pati ikaw, dali ka rin. Is the president excusing this? No. But this is an internationally known strategy that even international, I will not name them here, but international drug enforcement agencies promote intrigue among drug lords. Now, is it still murder? Yes. Should we still investigate it? Yes. But should we blame the administration and blame the police? Ngayon na ang mga drug lords hindi na monopoly, hindi nagkakaisa, ngayon na sila nagpapatayan, sasabihin po natin na kasalanan to ng presidente. You know, one peculiar statistic that I did not hear today is that there is a 13% drop in crime. Kasi ang tinitignan natin patay yung yung human rights or bleeding hearts, who I respect, who I help out, you come to my office, tutulungan ko kayo. Pero parati ko po sinasabi sa mga kaibigan ko na ganito ang pananaw, paano naman yung mga nag-overdose? Paano naman po yung 17 anyos, 16 anyos, solong anak, ang magulang nag-OFW, iniwan ang pamilya, makapag-aral lang, binentahan ng droga, nag-overdose, patay. O yun, wala sa radar nyo, wala sa human rights yun. O, paano naman yung isang barkada na binangga ng kotse kasi durog yung driver, patay silang lahat? O, wala rin naman sa radar yun eh. Wala rin naman sa summary killings yun eh. Di ba? So, I know you are equally as upset. Dahil tao din kayo eh. Meron din kayo mga kamag-anak kilala na involved sa droga eh. Na biktima din ng droga. No? So yes, let us confront these issues of killings. Let us invite the Chief PNP here. Let us ask him how they are monitoring the police. Let us ask him how they're investigating it. It's my 18th year. Alam mo, in a few weeks, we'll inaugurate only the second crime lab of the country. Panahon pa po ni Presidente Arroyo, sinisingit ko parati, trinatry ko isingit sa budget. Huwag po magagalit sa akin si Senator Ping. Hindi po pork barrel yon, kung hindi insertion or it is an advocacy, no, that he also believes in, na magkaroon tayo ng crime lab. So, if there are some critics who said, bakit naman umpisa pa lang hearing na sa extrajudicial killing? Because there are many people suffering. Bakit hindi muna tayo mag-hearing na itaas ang sweldo ng pulis? Ba't hindi mo tayo mag-hearing kung paano protektahan ng mga piskal para hindi sila at the mercy of drug lords at may additional allowance sila, at kung kailangan nila ng equipment like bulletproof vest, kailangan nila yung opisina nila mas secure, ba't hindi yun ang una natin hearing? Crime labs. So, Mr. President, this is a democracy. Just because certain members of the administration are saying, hindi dapat ito unahin na Senate na investigasyon, that doesn't mean it's an attack on the Senate. It is freedom of speech. It is simply saying, sa laki ng problema at dami ng problema, siguro, i-monitor natin, oversight sa human rights, pero in the same manner that our colleague is appealing, listen first, investigate first before judging her. Let me make the same appeal for our president. But actually, he doesn't need it eh. Let me make the same appeal for the PO1s of this country. Those who are making 15,000 pesos only when the cost of living is 25,000 to 35,000 in our major cities. Those PO1s who we tell, hulihin mo ang pusher. Those PO1s who we tell na pag may barel, labas mo rin baril mo, barilin mo rin. Those PO1s who sometimes come home in a casket, or kung hindi man sa casket in the old administrations, not just the Aquino administration, in many administrations, would come home Nilabanan ang sindikato, anong baon nila pag-uwi? Suspension. At sasabihin sa asawa, wala silang gagawin. So I'm not against investigations, Mr. President, but we have limited time. Napakalaki ng opportunity natin to build this nation. So it's up to each and every chairperson. And I believe in every one of you. Ano bang uunahin ninyo? Now, if the former Justice Secretary and our colleague can come up with facts and not speculation, there are facts, as in the killings. But inimbestigahan din ba niya na isa to? Or is she telling us, ayaw imbestigahan to ng polis? Kasi kung ayaw to imbestigahan ng polis, ibang usapan yun. Pero kung iniimbestigahan to ng polis at hindi pa tayo kompleto sa facts, and then we will go into that kind of hearings, it is for all of us to ask ourselves now, yan ba ang pinaka-importanting gawin natin ngayon? Yan ba ang pinaka-urgent? And let me also pose this question to all of us, Mr. President. Hindi lang naman po yung mga pulis ang nakabantay at nanonood sa atin ngayon. Nanonood ang mga drug lords. So if there's unintended consequences, like for example, I don't think the Justice Secretary intended to attack the Senate when he attacked one member. But I do know what you mean, my dear colleague, because once upon a time, I was in the opposition and I felt that an attack on me was an attack on the whole Senate. But the police are watching, the NBI is watching, TEDEA is watching, the OFWs are watching, and we have to also be careful. If we think, Mr. President, na may hate campaign against the human rights, how do you think the police feel? How do you think the President feels? How do you think the PDEA, the NBI, etc.? Lahat na lang ng jokes tungkol sa politiko, sa police, at saka sa abogado. Lahat ng masasamang jokes. They're the butt of jokes. We're the butt of jokes. We have all the power and resources for image building, Mr. President. The police does not have this. So let me end there, Mr. President, and while welcoming our colleague and committing to her that we will not allow anyone to attack the Senate or destroy the Senate or to stop any senator from conducting their investigation or attending an investigation. It is also left up to us to decide what is most important, how we use our time, and it is up to us to make sure na yung unintended consequence of telling the police, tumigil-tigil muna kayo. Wala pa hong nangyayari. Lastly, Mr. President, naunahan na nga tayo ng Malacanang. Many of our colleagues here, which both of us talked to during the last 3 months, have told us, Senator Soto, Senator Recto, Senator Gordon, many of you have proposed rehab centers. You predicted. The President continues to be amazed that more than 100,000 people are surrendering. Ang problema, anong gagawin mo sa mga nagsusurrender? Mga to, yung iba user lang, yung iba addict. Yung addict, pagka walang pupuntahan, babalik at babalik kahanap ng droga. Ang problema, Mr. President, kung hindi ako nagkakamali, shabu is now 200 to 400% more expensive than it was a month ago. In some places, it's 1,000% more expensive, which is good news in the sense that many people will stop and cannot have money, but it's also bad news because the addicts who are violent will rob, will steal, will try to get money to feed their habit. That's why the rehab centers are also urgent. So these are the points that I'd like to attach to the speech of our colleague. Yes, let's stand up for human rights. Yes, let us not allow any unjustified killings. Yes, let us not accuse falsely or let us not accuse without a factual background any senator, but let's also not accuse the police, especially the PNP as an organization, of rub-outs until we have evidence. And when we do have evidence or we have a smoking gun or even just smoke, kung sasabihin natin where there's smoke, there's fire, let's isolate it. So if it was one event here in Pasay, one event in Davao, yun ang sabihin natin. Pero sabihin natin, yung mga polis, o alam naman na polis rub out, no? Galit tayo pag sasabihin, lahat ng politiko corrupt Tapos we will do the same sa police. Anyway, Mr. President, I bid you a good afternoon and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Cayetano.
Mr. Senate President.
What is the pleasure of Senator Ontiveros?
Yes, maybe no.
Mr. President, with the indulgence of the Majority Leader, may I also rise for a brief on a brief matter of personal collective privilege in reflection to the recent matter of personal and collective privilege of the good Senator Cayetano.
Perhaps, Mr. President, well, I will leave it to the two senators because I was about to interpellate Senator Cayetano, Mr. President.
So,
I'm very much interested in the,
can the chair solicit
the topics that were taken up. But if she would like to do a rejoinder of some sort, go ahead, and I will, if the gentleman from Taguig will yield, I will continue to interpellate him after she has spoken. Perhaps we can also dwell in what she has to say.
Mr. President.
So is that arrangement
Mr. President,
acceptable to Senator Cayetano?
Just as a matter of order.
Yes.
Because once the person who spoke on personal and collective privilege sits down or yields the floor, his time is up and anyone can stand on a different matter. So if the lady would like to interpolate, I would gladly answer any questions as far as my ability allows. If not, and she wants to speak up, may I request that we finish the interpellation just as a matter of order, and then we can go to, then I will yield the floor.
Majority Leader, can the chair solicit a motion for a minute suspension?
I move to suspend, Mr.
A
President.
minute suspension. citizen. Okay.
We're ready to resume, Mr.
The
President.
session is resumed. Senator Cayetano has the floor. Senator Soto wishes to interpolate.
Thank you, Mr. President. As rightfully manifested by Senator Cayetano, who was the previous majority floor leader, someone who has the floor has the floor. And once he yields, he has lost the floor, actually. So it is best that we continue with my interpolation on the speech of Senator Cayetano. So will the distinguished gentleman from Taguig yield to a few questions?
Yes, Mr. President, my privilege. Thank you, Majority Leader.
Thank you. In fact, Mr. President, I was just about to move for the referral of the speech of Senator De Lima and Senator Cayetano to the proper committees. In this case, perhaps Committee on Justice and then Committee on Public Order. But my curiosity was aroused by a number of points that were raised by the two senators, Mr. President. So, inasmuch as Senator De Lima does not wish to be interpolated, I would like to pick the mind of the former Majority Leader on some of the issues she raised and also the issues that Senator Cayetano raised. Let me start, Mr. President, by the reaction of Senator Cayetano on a quote that I have read somewhere. It says, "A person has lost his human right when he destroyed the lives of many young people." Does a person lose, when does a person lose his human right? Or does he ever lose?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Majority Leader, Mr. President. But actually, it is a pregnant or trick question because basta't may hininga ka, in fact, kahit patay ka, may karapatan ka pa eh. Pag patay ka na, may karapatan pa rin yung, kaya may libel, di ba? Pagka yung memory nung patay ay inupakan mo, yung kung kanino mapupunta yung katawan o yung bangkay, karapatan ng mga kamag-anak mo yon. So, it is actually part of the political rhetoric when we say na yung mga pusher na yan, nasaan ang human rights because they destroyed the life of other people. And in the Duterte Cayetano campaign, we have heard that sometimes. But the President, during the time as a candidate, was always quick to explain and clarify that pwede mo lang patayin kapag ka lumaban. And he has said it time and time again, we will deal with the drug problem within the confines of the Constitution. But does a pusher or does a person lose some of his rights in certain stages of his life or of conducting a crime? Of course. For example, presumption of innocence. Pagka pumasok ka sa opisina ko ng 1 ng umaga, hindi ka naman nagpaalam, binuksan mo drawer ko, hawak ko mga dokumento, pumasok yung security ko o yung nagbabantay ng opisina ko at sinabi ko, hoy, ikaw magnanakaw. Hindi mo siya pwede i-libel, hindi mo pwede sabihin presumption of innocence. Para sa korte yon. Pagdating sa korte, we have to prove that nagnanakaw ka. But in that moment, the burden shifts to you for you to tell me bakit ka nasa kwarto at bakit mo hawak ang dokumento. So for example, Mr. President, Mr. Majority Leader, who is one of the leading fighters against drugs, no, not only during his term as Vice Mayor in Quezon City, but all the way here. Ilan beses nyo po sinubukan i-amend yung drug, yung anti-drug laws natin, and many times successful because, di ba nagiging problema yung kung kailangan kasama yung barangay, paano ko yung barangay kasama sa pusher, di ba? So yung the burden of proof, for example, for saying that someone is innocent, pagka buy-bust operation, naglabas na ng droga, yung bibilan mo, hawak na niya yung marked money, right there and there, the presumption of the police that you are a drug pusher, nagsishift. And right there and there, may presumption of regularity on the side of the police. So yes, may human rights pa ang tao kahit na anong sama ng ginawa niya. 'Di ba? For example, hindi tayo naniniwala sa hanging, sa firing squad. Kaya nung meron tayong death penalty, kaya nating ginawang lethal injection dahil naniniwala tayo sa humanity or meron human rights. Lastly, Mr. President, the Constitution says that there cannot be cruel punishment, cruel and unusual punishment. So that shows that kahit anong sama ng krimen mo, anong sama mong tao, ay pwede ka pa rin, meron ka pa rin karapatan, no? But that doesn't mean naman that pagka yung karapatan ng iba ay apektado na, supreme yung karapatan mo. So kung ako pusher, Mr. President, tapos nilabasan kita ng barel at sabihin ko, hoy, ikaw police, ako pusher, ako pwede kitang barilin. Ikaw, hindi mo ako pwedeng barilin. Mali ata yun. At that point in time, I give up my right, no, not to be shot or not to be arrested because lumaban ako eh. So, Mr. President, that's my interpretation of, that statement.
There's a very thin line in the way I comprehend the answer of the gentleman, but I will take it as that. All right. I will leave it at that, although I was about to ask if... Well, let me ask it. What if there is a person who rapes someone and kills someone, may human right pa rin siya?
Meron pa rin, he has the right to a counsel, right to remain silent, right to a trial. So, meron pa rin siyang karapatan. Pero wala na siyang right sa freedom when he is when he's incarcerated. He will lose his political rights if he is found guilty. So, there are inalienable rights like right to life that can only be lost when you threaten the life of another. But there are also rights that you can lose because of your actions, di ba? Karapatan mo ang companionship ng asawa mo, pero kung hindi maganda trato sa asawa mo or kakaliway, etc., at hiwalayan ka, you lose that right, no?
All right, let me move on, Mr. President. I wanted to dwell on it, but never mind. I'm sure.
Well, I understand your point, Mr. Majority Leader, Mr. President. That is why I'm saying I agree with the former Justice Secretary. You cannot go around shooting people. But I disagree with the impression being made. The international community is also watching us when the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said about the extrajudicial killings of media. Our representative to the UN did not even defend our president-elect. He did not even question the Secretary General of the UN, who had no right to make that statement. That is not part of his powers. This is no tyrant, despot. He was the president-elect. He did not know the context, but it is there in the record. And there are people trying to besmudge or trying to smudge the reputation of our country and our president by making it appear that we are in the wild, wild west. On the contrary, Mr. President, Mr. Majority Leader from Quezon City, mikot po tayo sa mga barangay ng Quezon City. It's much more quiet now. People are saying that they now have human security, they now have safety. They can now walk in the streets and hindi sila takot. So, yung pong nilalabas sa media na parang wild, wild west at kahit sino na lang babarilin, di ba, is just utterly false. No? Am I saying everyone who was killed is justified? No. Kaya nga dapat imbestigahan.
Right.
But I'm saying that the campaign of the PNP is bearing fruit, and we should in fact congratulate them.
That brings me to one of the cards that was flashed earlier by while Senator De Lima was delivering her speech. There was a mail online quote of the president that said, "Go ahead and kill drug addicts." I've never heard the president say that. I've heard him say that kill the pushers, but I've never heard him say kill drug addicts. Why did that find itself in a mail online headline, Mr.
President, that's why I wanted to ask the Justice Secretary and our colleague, because the President has clarified that numerous times. He even told us about the rehab center that he has built in Davao. And how can you kill the addicts? First of all, they're victims. Second of all, there's 3 million. That will be genocide. That's precisely my point, Mr. Majority Leader. No? While the victims are crying, imbestigahan mo kami, may mga ginagamit to na amplifier na pinapalabas na wala ng order sa atin at kaliwat kanan na lang ang patayan. You know? If you look at the crime index and you look at what is happening per city, you know, kahit sabi mo, 10, 15, 20 namamatay araw-araw, ito yung lumalaban eh. Ito yung dating hindi hinuhuli na dati dinuduroan pa sa mukha ang mga pulis eh. No? If you go to Tondo, for example, where I also have a project sa Palengke, panay bata ang ginagamit. At pag hinuli ang bata, ang sinasabi ng bata sa kapitan at sa pulis, bawal nyo kaming hulihin. Dahil alam nila yung batas eh. So, we're not pointing fingers here, Mr. President. What we're saying is this. Our colleague, Senator De Lima said, there must be a better way. What is happening now is a better way than the past administration. Because at the very least, na-address ang problema ng droga. Is there a better way than this? I hope so. But let's come up with those suggestions. Let's use our congressional hearings to come up with that better way. Pero yung sasabihin mo lang iimbestigahan natin dahil there has to be a better way, that doesn't really do us any good because anyone can say there must be a better way, no? So anyone in the audience can stand up right now and say, Senator Cayetano, you're wasting our time. There must be a better way. But teach me, what is that better way, no? You know, yung sabog na pusher na hindi alam ang gagawin, na may hawak ng armas, sumpak, barel, kutsilyo, hindi mo pwedeng, hindi sane yan, Mr. Majority Leader. I mean, you would agree with me, di ba? So, hindi katulad ng ordinaryong kriminal na nang hostage or yung addict na nang hostage na pwede mo sabihin, you talk them down. You move people back, di ba? You don't shoot to kill. Pero yung pusher, nag-buy bust ka, tapos biglang naglabas ng baril, anong gagawin mo? Aatras ka, pababayaan mo una kang mabaril? So, that's my point, Mr. President. No? I agree, there must be a better way. What's that better way? But this way now is a better way than just neglecting dealing with the drug problem. And basically, that was what has happened in our country, not to point any fingers. All of us were looking for a better way. All of us did not think that a nationwide Davao style of anti-drug would work. But it's working.
When you say a better way, earlier, indeed, I heard Senator De Lima say there must be another way. No? Talking about the killings. And you're saying there must be a better way. I do not totally disagree, but I would propose there must be other ways. All right? Like why? How? How did we get to this situation, this illegal drug situation? Perhaps one of the issues that should be taken up by the committees when they handle it, the Committee on Justice and the Committee on Public Order, would be to check on how our government has handled Section 92 of Republic Act 9165. What is Section 92 of Republic Act 9165? It's the delay and bungling in the prosecution of drug cases. If we have prosecuted well these drug cases, perhaps it wouldn't be this way. It wouldn't need to go into the wild, wild west. The last time we heard, we asked during a budget hearing last year, there was almost 80% drug cases dismissed. 94%, according to Senator Lacson. So, perhaps in your hearings now that will be conducted, let us ask the Department of Justice to submit how many drug cases they have investigated under Section 92. Then let us ask the Supreme Court for statistics on how many drug cases have been dismissed. Who are these judges who keep on dismissing these drug cases? These are other ways to probably handle the problem of illegal drugs. And perhaps lastly, indeed,
Mr. President, let me just agree with you on that point. There are parallel, other, and there's much more that we can do. I will agree on that.
Thank you. And lastly, perhaps one of the bills that is pending in the Senate I humbly propose that the PhilHealth cover the rehabilitation. Kaya hindi na re-rehab yung iba mahal eh. Yung rehab centers ng gobyerno, puno. But if PhilHealth will cover it, everybody, pwedeng lahat ng member ng PhilHealth na may kamag-anak, pwedeng ipasok sa rehabilitation center. We informed the President about that and he totally agrees. So perhaps this is one of the issues that should be taken up by the Committee on Public Order, Justice and Human Rights, the Committee on Health, and report it out right away. This will help our situation right now, Mr. President. So I wish to thank the gentleman for his answers. There is an incoming speech, but in the meantime, allow me to move to refer the speech of Senator De Lima.
Senator
yes,
Pangilinan
sir.
wishes to be recognized.
Speaker. Mr. President, just before
I
that,
withdraw my motion, Mr. President.
on your last point, there must be other ways, and the PhilHealth, I agree. Once upon a time, Mr. President, when you say national security, there is only one aspect, national defense, armaments, training, military police. Right now, anyone who studies national security will include food security, the health of people as a problem of security, with the diseases that are going around, our situation of our electricity, cyber security, because you don't even have to launch a missile. That is why the time of President Arroyo, which is often quoted by President Duterte, is that drugs is a national security problem because the drug lords are running for mayor, running for Congress, running for governor, running for barangay captain, when they should be running away. Lastly, Mr. President, the Commission on Human Rights. All of us know the good chairman. All of us know that he dedicated his life to human rights and is a real advocate. Having said that, why is the Commission on Human Rights, bakit malayo sa tao? Because ang tingin ng tao ngayon, pag ikaw biktima ng pulis o ng militar, takbo ka sa human rights. Pagka ikaw ay may kamag-anak na napatay at hindi mapaliwanag paano, takbo ka ng human rights. Pero kung ikaw ay biktima ng drug lord, anak mo nag-overdose, hindi ka ba pwedeng tumakbo sa human rights at magsumbong? Tingin ko pwede. Kasi na-violate yung human rights mo. But we do not hear them making noise or having some activities regarding that. So in the same way that national security has evolved, human rights has to evolve. If it is the right of every citizen to be safe in their community. Pero ang problema, ang tingin ng police, militar, NBI, PDEA, etc., BJMP, kalaban nila yung human rights. And I don't think nakalaban nila. They are here to protect everyone's right, except that sometimes we put them in a box as if ang human rights at national security yung dati pa rin. That's why I admire what the good Senator Soto has been saying. He's not only proposed the use of PhilHealth for rehab, he's proposed also which the President has already adopted, the teaching of anti-drugs or the harm of drugs in elementary schools, prevention. He's also talked about how PDEA can be a better agency than drugs. So all of these are very productive kasi droga ang problema eh. I'm just saying, meron sector ng society, I'm not saying it's our good senator, but ginagamit din ang bawat speech, ang bawat press release, etc. para palabasin ang problema natin ay hindi droga, ang problema natin ay human rights at saka summary killing. Kaya sabi nga, we're replacing one impunity for the other. There is no impunity. No one is saying that you can go around the country to kill people. We will jail anyone who murders someone. But help us give the police the pay, the equipment, the training to go after them. Alam mo po, Mr. President, 1/3 lang ng lahat ng investigador sa Pilipinas ang may formal training. Tapos galit tayo. Bakit yung pamilyang ganito, hindi maimbestigan, hindi malaman kung sino, walang pang fingerprint, walang pang ballistics, walang pang DNA test. Tayo ang Kongreso, tayo naglalagay ng pera eh. Imbis na mag-aksaya tayo ng panahon na magbintangat at finger pointing, the President himself said, let's stop finger pointing. But let's get these things done, Mr. President.
Thank you. The gentleman from
What is
Taguig. The Senator
Yes.
Pangilinan wishes to be
Senator,
recognized.
what is the
Mr.
pleasure of Senator Pangilinan?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. I would like to know if the gentleman from Taguig would be willing to yield to maybe 2 or 3 questions.
Yes, Mr. President, it will be a pleasure.
Yes, Mr. President, the reason why I was persuaded to stand up and raise a few questions was the remark of the good gentleman from Taguig that he acknowledges that he wishes to also find better ways of addressing the issues at hand. And what ways are these? Mr. President, I'd like to know if the good gentleman, Senator Allen, will agree that the root of criminality is the inability of the justice system to punish the guilty in a fair and speedy process.
So, President, in a general way, it goes to philosophy. Some of us believe that humans are basically good but do bad things. But some of us believe that people are bad and are suppressed by the external law. So it will go to a philosophical discussion. Let me just put it this way. I agree with the good senator. If you have a system like Singapore,
Precisely.
na may ginawa kang krimen, in a few minutes, in a few hours, alam ko sino, and then kulong ka agad, and then we will have much less crime.
Precisely, precisely. In other words, if the system of justice is modern, efficient, able to punish the guilty, able to free and acquit the innocent, then we will not be where we are today in this manner, in this debate regarding extrajudicial killings, vigilantism, and the like, as well as drug abuse and drug syndicates.
For that matter, Mr. President, even President Duterte said, if ayos yung justice system, baka hindi siya ang presidente. Kung walang droga and there was no need for him, we might have been attracted to a different platform of a different person. So let me agree with Senator Pangilinan that yes, we do have a problem with the justice system, and yes, if we had a better or more efficient or working justice system, we wouldn't be discussing this right now.
In other words, strategically, if we are to finally resolve the issue of criminality, disregard for the rule of law, then the strategic direction should be, how do we modernize? How do we ensure that we have a modern, efficient, effective system of justice in the country?
In general, Mr. President, I will agree with that as an exception when you are nearing a narco state. So all other countries that improve their justice system dahil ang problema nila ay white-collar or blue-collar crime, poverty, murder. But when it comes to drugs, when you're nearing the narco state, it's not as simple as fixing the justice system because people in the justice system or the drug lords penetrate the justice system.
No, regardless of whether it's a narco state or nearing a narco state, it's a question of if there is an effective justice system, we would not have reached a narco state status.
Yes, Mr. President.
Also, if we are faced with a narco state reality, then ultimately, still, a modern justice system is necessary for us to be able to eventually address not only drugs, smuggling, corruption, and other cases.
I agree, Mr. President, but in a non-narco state or non-drug that you have a problem with the justice system, even organized crime, there's no need for a sort of catharsis. Dahil kung nandyan ang pera, nandyan ang talent, nandyan ang
I agree.
But in a semi-narco state, it's much more complicated because you really need a reset. In Georgia, if I may just input this, when forgot the name of the president of Georgia, but there are 4 million people. No one believed the police. You know what he did, Mr. President? He fired every single policeman. You can get back your job as the police, but the burden was on you to prove that you were not corrupt, you're not into drugs, you're not into crime. He gave them a few months. Sabi niya, in a few months, pag hindi nyo inayos, tanggal kayong lahat ng police. Nangyari.
Mr. President, I see the point being raised by the good gentleman that we need perhaps outside the box approaches. We need a different. It was Einstein who said that doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result each time is insanity. So I agree in the sense that perhaps the point being raised by our good senator from Taguig is that we have to do things differently. We have to be more creative. We have to find ways and means to be able to grapple with the problem, approach it perhaps with different lenses, ika nga, perhaps shifting paradigms even, so that we may be able to finally reach that modern justice system that we would like to have.
Agree, Mr. President.
Okay. That being the case, Mr. President, just to lay the premises, the slow system of justice has to be addressed. The average case life, if I'm not mistaken, in the first level courts is 6 years. That's precisely why there is frustration. That is precisely why there is the idea of shortcuts. If the shelf life of a case, for example, is only 18 months, yung mga provisions of law, yung mga trial, pagkatapos ng 18 na buwan, guilty, sentensya. Not guilty, released. Pagka ganun po ang mangyayari, hindi na ho magkakaproblema dito sa usapin po ng shortcuts. Number 2, 40% of our prosecution service positions are vacant. So, here are steps that have to be taken, another way of addressing, or another approach. Number 1, let us move towards reducing the shelf life of criminal prosecution in this country. How do we do that? Let us look at legislation. Let us look at perhaps ways of being able to bring down the delay in the disposition of cases. Number 2, fill up the vacant positions in the prosecution service. Maybe in the next 6 years, from 40% vacancy, let's bring it down to 15% vacancy, or maybe single-digit vacancy. That will perhaps create a fresh shot in the arm of the prosecution service. Obviously, if your vacancy is 40%, how can you speed up the disposition of cases laging walang prosecution, laging postponed? 3, the vacancies in our judiciary is almost 1/4. 25% vacant ang ating judiciary. Again, pagka nagpatong-patong ang mga kaso, delay na naman ang resolution of cases. My point, Mr. President, and this I hope our good gentleman, the good gentleman rather from Taguig, Senator Alan, will share with our President. The budget of the judiciary, I found out just this afternoon, is only 0.8% of the entire national budget. Only 0.8%. Not even 1% of the entire national budget goes to the judiciary. If you include the justice system, including the DOJ, perhaps it will be another 0.8%. 2% goes to a system of justice that hopes to be able to address all these corruption, criminality, drugs, etc. Palagay ko, kinakailangan din natin busisiin ito ng husto. Mahirap hong magtuturoan ho tayo, pero yung pinakapunot dulo, binibigyan pa po natin ng tunay at malawakang pagtugon doon sa problema ng criminality and rule of law. Ang ating conviction rates, if I understand it, or if I recall, tumaas na ho sa corruption cases. Pero kinakailangan pang i-sustain. Wala pa ho, mga 30% na ho ata ngayon. Dati ho, wala pang 15%. So nagdoble na. I may be mistaken, but it is still far, far away from Hong Kong or Japan, where the conviction rate in criminal cases in Japan, in Hong Kong, if I'm not mistaken, it's 80%. 80% of corruption cases end up in conviction. In our case, like I said earlier, if I'm not mistaken, it's around a little over 30%. Pag mas marami na pong napaparusahan, talagang mas magkakaroon ng takot sa ating mga batas at respeto. So, my last question, Mr. President, is this. Are you familiar with the JELAC? The gentleman from Taguig.
Yes,
Is
Mr. President, I think I was in the JBC with
That is
Senator Pangilinan when he proposed that. And it is a good mechanism, and maybe he can explain it a little bit better since he was one of the prime movers for that.
Yes, the JELAC is the Joint Judiciary Executive Legislative Advisory and Consultative Council. It was convened in 2007, if I'm not mistaken, or 2008, under President Arroyo, Speaker Prospero Nograles from Davao, Senate President Manny Villar, as well as Chief Justice Renato Puno. It had only met twice, Mr. President, but in the 2 times that it convened, the JELAC was able to make the necessary recommendations and approval of the budget of the judiciary reaching 1%. In other words, it was a 20% increase in budgetary support for the judiciary. And precisely, budgetary support so that there is a strengthening of the rule of law and modernization of our system of justice. I think strategically, if we address the vacancies in the prosecution service, if we address the vacancies in our justice system, in the judiciary, if we address the unacceptable average of 6 years in terms of a case life in the first level courts, and work in the next 6 years towards reducing all that, then we will have a system of justice that will be swift, efficient, that will punish the guilty, and that will acquit the innocent. And I think the shortcuts will be a thing of the past, and respect for the rule of law. Not out of fear, per se, but out of realizing and trust that the system of justice is finally working, and the guilty are finally punished, and the innocent will always have their day in court.
Mr. President, may I just state for the record, all of us senators here, we have good ideas, and we speak alike. No? My father suggested to President Ramos and worked it out with the court for a special criminal court. It worked, but then they changed. Ngayon, nag-respond na rin ang Supreme Court, nag-create ng more courts for drug cases. I'm sure Secretary De Lima did her part in the DOJ, despite many things on her plate. But you know, all courses in criminology will teach you that it's never the process, never the penalty. It is always the certainty that you will be punished. And ang problema sa drugs, everyone thinks that they can get away with it. That's why people listen to President Duterte. Does he have all the answers? Maybe not. But does he have the one answer that charges into the fray and produce results? Yes. How do we know that? 2015 versus 2016, January to June, 30% less crimes already. Nag-umpisa pa lang, 31 days. So question, should we do the suggestions of the majority leader? Should we take up urgently the suggestions of Senator Pangilinan? By all means, because all of this will come up with a holistic approach to everything. But what I'm saying, Mr. President, let's keep our eyes on the ball. Ang kalaban dito, pusher, hindi police. Ang kakampi dito, presidente, hindi siya kalaban. And if there are cases of extrajudicial killings, let us bring it to him as an institution. I will volunteer myself to take it to him. You can take it to him, Mr. President. Anyone here can take it to him. And he has already stated, he will go after those who have abused their position. May they be in the military, police. But to make sweeping statements at palabasin natin, ang police hindi ginagawa trabaho nila, sobra ang droga. Ngayon naman, ginagawa trabaho dahil maraming patay, berdugo naman sila, sala sa lamig, sala sa init. You know, they will be confused. So that is, I really, Mr. President, thought twice, said a short prayer before I stood up, because it's the right of everyone to speak here, and human rights is important to every country, to every person, to every nation. No? But the problem is, Mr. President, the human rights of each family na biktima ng droga is being violated every day. And finally, we have someone who made it his priority. It was on President Aquino's agenda. It was on President Arroyo's agenda. It was on President Era, President Ramos, all of our presidents. But we must agree that right now it's front and center. And if we are here to improve that program, to have oversight, to make sure it's being done well, by all means. But if we are here, and then we will try to, to smudge or to smear this program, or unwittingly be used by those who want to smear that program and make it appear that the policy of this new government is extrajudicial killings and we're in the wild, wild west, I must protest. And I must stand up to say, that's not what I fought for, that's not what I believe in, and that's not what's happening now. So, President, let me end with this. Nung nagmimerienda po tayo dyan sa likod, kanina nung nagbabasa ng mga bills, no? At birthday naman ni Senator Joel, kaya tama lang na magmerienda tayo dyan. Ang pinapalabas po nila, yung mayor ng Leyte na inaamin na ngayon na yung anak niya is into illegal drugs, nakasama ni Chief PNP, more popularly known as Bato. No? Question, if the President did not go 100% against drug, kung hindi sinabi sa mga pulis, backup ako, kung hindi sinabi sa pulis, pag lumaban, patayin niyo ako, tingin niyo yung mayor na yan lalaban? Di takot sa abogado yan eh. Di takot sa piskal, di takot makulong, di takot sa pera. And that's the typical drug lord. But to see that the administration is serious and to see that the full force of the law will be used against you, including killing you if you fight back or use arms against the police, that is what moves people. So, Mr. President, let's join hands in ensuring that this is done in accordance with the Constitution and our laws. But let us support this worthy endeavor of our President and of our members of the PDEA, NBI, military, and PNP. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Gordon is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, thank you very much. I'm actually standing here with mixed emotions at the moment. All of us are, I believe. So I wonder if my good friend, Senator Cayetano, will yield just a few questions.
Yes, Mr. President, it would be an honor to do so.
We were in the refectory a while ago when the distinguished gentle lady gave her privileged speech about drugs and the alleged extrajudicial killings that have been ongoing. If memory serves correct, I was once upon a time in America lobbying for veterans' rights. And one senator, I was then at that time with Senator Inoue, who was fighting for veterans' rights for us. One senator from, I believe it was Patrick Leahy, I was with the ambassador at that time, raised the issue that they're not going to give any aid to the Philippines because of extrajudicial killings. This is during the time of our previous administration. So, Mr. President, when we start talking about extrajudicial killings, there is a long history of extrajudicial killings in this country, if you will. And the sad truth about this, and I'm sure the gentleman will agree, that there has been nothing done to put a stop to this. Would you agree?
There's been little done.
Thank you. Upon the other hand, we are talking about impunity versus impunity today in these very hallowed halls of the Senate. Allegations that there is impunity in alleged extrajudicial killings, and the fact that we are reacting and we are seeing a phenomenon in our country that has not been seen in a long, long time. A president has been elected with 6 million votes majority precisely because he spoke out against the impunity of drug proliferation, of corruption, and now he's addressing it. The shoe is on the other foot. He is now being accused of alleged extrajudicial or tolerating extrajudicial killings. Would you agree with that statement?
I agree, Mr. President.
I heard our good friend and my fraternity brother, Senator Pangilinan, talked about what is the solution, and I was troubled. I didn't want to participate here, lest it might drop into my lap as a Blue Ribbon Committee chairman, and I wanted to keep my objectivity. But the fact remains is that we have been pounded in this country by apathy, by negligence, by our inability to solve the problem. We know how to fix the blame, but we don't know how to fix the problem. Would you agree with that?
Difficult to answer. Some of us have ideas, but difficult, Mr.
I'm sure you have, but
In
that's
spirit,
just
I
an
know what you mean.
observation. I'm just asking you to agree or not. But the general tendency in this country is we know how to fix the blame, but when we start talking here in this august body as senators who are elected by the national populace, we're expected to provide solutions, and we're all seeking a solution to this problem. And so therefore, I hasten to say that when you go back, as an investigation, you go back to the crime scene and you go back to the preambles or the what preceded the crime scene, we can easily fix the blame and say, well, there's no enforcement. In our airport, our airports are very porous. In fact, it's not only drugs that come in, but yung dagdag bala, hindi nasosolve. Our shorelines are very porous. Drugs come in, and possibly another power could really destabilize us by just keep on bringing in drugs in our country. In fact, there's even a lawyer from Hong Kong now investigating or trying to represent alleged shabu smuggling in Subic Bay. And they're saying that the police have really tried to pin the blame on innocent Chinese individuals who happen to be aboard and confiscated drug materials or drug making equipment have been done. So if you go back and back and back and you go back to the penitentiary of this country, I'm aghast because it's not only happened in the last administration, but in the previous administration. You know, people, there are drug pushers there are criminals out there who are being given special privileges. Jacuzzis, women in prison, weapons, money, you name it, they have it. Isn't that correct?
Correct, Mr. President.
In fact, Your Honor, in the past, people are being allowed to escape from jail to kill people. When I was in the Senate, there was a drug lord who allowed somebody who was allowed to control practically the prison, and a judge was killed. And it landed on my lap, and we were able to find out from the police if they want to solve the crime, they were able to pinpoint the drug pusher or the drug lord in Congress who was already in jail. And so up to now, they're still able to, sa Tagalog, nahahasik pa sila ng lagim at dilim sa ating bansa. So obviously, there is apathy, there is negligence, there is something that deliberately there is a poison even among our law enforcement authorities, even among the people running the jails, the justice system, the judges. I remember the father of one of our senators here, Mayor Estrada, when he became president, said, let's kill all the pushers. There was even a movie about that. There was even statements made by the good president at that time saying that there are hoodlums in robes. And yet, we're still here. So we can keep on going back and back and back. And still, apparently, there has been nothing done about the problem. And so, Mr. Chairman, it behooves us here today, as I said a while ago to our good friend Senator Villar, you know, ever since I've been in the Senate, we keep praying and we all try to invent a better prayer than the last prayer the day before. But apparently God does not listen. Because we keep praying and saying, oh, this is a good country, we can do this and that. But up to now, our prayers apparently have been falling on deaf ears. I hope I'm not doing a blaspheme event here, but certainly this is what I'm seeing here today. The good Justice Secretary was Justice Secretary when all these things happened, and she may very well say that I was the one who started the investigation. But the fact remains is there is still command responsibility all the way up to the President of the last administration when they did not stop this proliferation of drug lords, these abuses in the penitentiary, or for that matter, could I ask the question now that there is killings nowadays, or there are killings nowadays, because I'm surprised. I have not heard a drug lord, really a big drug lord killed on the streets of our country. What I see are drug pushers, and to a certain extent, unfairly or fairly. There is statement even by that Pieta image of a photograph that came out in the newspapers that says we may have killed the innocent, or for that matter, they killed their own case when the wife even admitted that the guy who was killed was also taking drugs. So everybody seems to be stained. Everybody seems to have the blood of Cain in our persons. So, Mr. President, I don't know really what the solution will be, but I do know this. We have to start somewhere. And if there is a reduction in crime today, as the good gentleman from the Give would have us believe, the fact remains is there's also an uneasy feeling even amongst us, even among the people that want the pushers eliminated, that we are on a very slippery situation when people are being killed everywhere and nobody knows who's doing the killing, and we just say vigilante killing. When in fact, you can very well ask the policeman, bakit alam nyo ngayon bigla na nababaril nyo at sinasabi nyong pusher yan? Were you handling them before? That question may very well be asked, isn't it? And I think we will all agree to that. Even whatever party, whatever president we had, we may very well agree to that fact. And so, Mr. President, there are processes here. To the good gentle lady, and I hope she doesn't misinterpret me, when we accuse the police of something, we must be ready to present the evidence. And you don't have to, Your Honor. I accepted, and I did not ask for the Blue Ribbon Committee. I accepted it out of duty as a senator. But the point is, I am not a policeman who will investigate. I'm just here to go in aid of legislation. And when I look at the situation, Mr. Chairman, is it not true that we have, a law? We do have a law, Republic Act 85-51, that when a policeman is involved, when a firearm is discharged, there is that automatic provision that automatically an investigation must be conducted by the Internal Affairs Service. Not by Human Rights, not by the Senate, but by the Internal Affairs Division. We crafted that law here. I was not part of it, but it was crafted before me. Is that right?
That's correct, Mr.
And so therefore, we should allow that law that was crafted in this Congress to take its course. For example, we don't have to go far, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President. When a policeman is involved with somebody who's already in handcuffs and a firearm is grabbed, there is a smoking gun right away. No one is going to believe that a guy, especially in this atmosphere where people are being killed, maybe it can go 50-50. The guy says, I'm going to be killed. I may as well have a chance where he grab his gun. But upon the other hand, when there are 3 policemen holding him and in his handcuffs, it is unlikely that he would grab the gun. And so therefore, he would be killed. Isn't that correct, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. President.
So you see, Mr. Chairman, where is the Internal Affairs Services in this picture? Perhaps that is the question we should ask. Perhaps we should ask the PNP head by the name of Bato or Colonel De La Rosa, not to be Bato in coming out with an investigation. Not to be niggard, not to be kuripot in coming out with an investigation, that in these areas where there is a chance to find out whether the policeman had properly discharged their firearm or killed somebody, that he has to explain, and that immediately there must be a report. And that all these vigilante killings must be investigated nonetheless, and we should not just, wipe our hands clean of it. Upon the other hand, I cannot help being a victim of crime myself to realize that my own father was assassinated by a person who was allowed to escape from prison and then was going to be brought back. And that is why I cannot go on either side of the coin here. I tend to agree that siguro dapat talaga, out of desperation, the people of this country is willing to look the other way just to get rid of the problem. In the same manner, I'm not ready to look at the other way to say we will have the death penalty when, in fact, I heard here instances where we say there's very little judges, there are very few fiscals, and the investigation, and I heard you say there's only one additional crime laboratory that is now going to be added, and that is why I worry about the death penalty. I'd rather have that guy in jail rather than make a mistake in the investigation. And this is exactly where we are today. We are dealing with incomplete scenarios. But it is our duty to make the law work, to let this Republic Act 8551 come here. I'm not going to advise my good friend, Senator De Lima, that she is out of line, but I think it might be premature. And forgive me if I may say that, because unless you have evidence, and you're right, some policemen may be doing their job, some policemen may be taking advantage of the situation, eliminating these pushers, but it is the right of the Senate also to say, where are the drug lords? That is what we want to see. The drug lords must be prosecuted, not persecuted, prosecuted, so that we can really actually believe. And I believe the President of the Philippines, and I believe him because he was a mayor like me, and I believe that he is really sincere about peace and order. It is an act of national desperation, that which is going on. That when our children are afraid, you know, we're recommending traffic, for example, be solved. I'm recommending that many of the people who own cars go take school buses. But I am ready to say we must have police or marshals guard the school buses so we can convince them. Because parents are afraid their children could be waylaid, given drugs, and the whole cycle repeats itself again. A curse to a family. So, Mr. President, I just would like to add these points into the discussion. Perhaps it's important, and I would like to acknowledge the position of Senator Cayetano, because he gave us points of view that are important. But we must not also be precipitate. Congratulations are in order when 13% of the crime rate has gone down. But at the same time, we must tarry a little and say, congratulations will be in order when we can be assured that the drug lords, the guys that have to be in jail, must be in jail. And therefore, more must be done to be able to get this done. I am certainly in support of the President of the Republic of the Philippines when he goes after. I have not heard him say, kill any addict. You know, I'm a mayor, and as mayor of a local city, especially a tough city like Olongapo when I was there, or Davao City in the case of Mayor Duterte, you will forgive, and I will address my good friend, the Human Rights Commission. You know, we are also allowed excesses in our language. We have to tell the public that, hey, we're going to go after you hammer and tongs. That's part of the psychological warfare which we do. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to condone killing. And that is why it behooves all of us here to find the necessary solutions, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, to this problem. Not just to talk about it, and it's good to talk, because we are here to find solutions, not just fix the problem. And so we thank God in this prayer that we have senators who can still stand up here on both sides. The other side represented by Senator De Lima, concerned, and the other side headed by Senator Cayetano, who practically right now is listening to the voices of the people saying, hey, there must be a solution. It cannot be just all rights. There's got to be a concomitant duty. And that is why, in the next Constitutional Convention or Constitutional Assembly, I will aspire to put in a committee on duties and obligations of citizens, and not just a Bill of Rights. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. President. I hope I did not tax your patience by delivering that long discourse.
Sir President,
Senator Cayetano.
I'd just like to assure Senator Gordon that the drug lords are also being addressed. Some of the police identified, some of the mayors identified, they might not look like drug lords because you might not see their airplanes, yachts, etc. But I totally understand and feel the same way that eventually this crusade has to include the people who are pulling the strings, not only the people who are selling. But let me say that this is phase one, and getting the drugs out of the street is much easier if you go against the pushers underneath. To balance that with the human rights, as lawyers, all of us here were taught that it's better to see 1,000 guilty people go free than to unjustly jail one innocent person or kill one innocent person. But may I just remind our colleagues, when this famous quote as this famous quote is being repeated, when it was first said, there wasn't synthetic drugs yet. Wala pang shabu. Diba? So it is still valid and we should still follow it. But let me amend it in this way. While we try to put the 1,000 guilty in jail or bring them to justice, and while we try to avoid that even one be falsely accused, every single day there is one innocent being sold drugs, mind being distorted, mind being destroyed, lives being destroyed. So in an ordinary crime, karnaper ako, senator ba may-ari ng kotse, it's easy to say he's innocent, I'm guilty. But in the crime against drugs, every victim is an innocent victim, that we cannot ignore. So let me stop there and thank our colleagues for arguing passionately, and maybe we can find a common solution, Mr. President.
Let me just state, Mr. Chairman, with your permission again, Mr. President, that I am not a critic of the President at the moment. But let me just state also that the President has taken a huge step that no other President has done. That is to identify 5 generals, whether fairly or unfairly. It sends a huge signal that nobody will be exempted. The very fact that mayors, as we saw in the refectory a while ago, and his son are being presented before television is, I think, very important, because we're dealing with the perception of extrajudicial killings, but also dealing with the perception that big fish, like generals, are now being accused by no less than the President of the Republic of the Philippines, which is a good sign, at least as far as I'm concerned, with all due respect, for democratic principle or democratic rights. When those 5 generals were unmasked by the President, I heard, and I'm not going to call them bleeding hearts, some of them were saying, hey, you violated the rights of this general. My God, I authored the plebs as a mayor, and I said policemen have an extraordinary amount of power under the social contract theory. We provide you with firearms, and when you use those firearms against the citizenry, we have the right administratively to have you suspended, even expelled, and pending appeal, you lose your job. In the same manner that you quoted chapter and verse the Georgian president who removed all the policemen and told them to perform their duties so that they can come back. And that is the point that I'd like to make. There is an effort, lest I be misunderstood right now, to address that problem, and the president has caught. Many of us want to be president of this country. In this, they say there are 24 presidents here in this chamber. I'm sure that is not far from the truth. And I will not be a hypocrite, but I can tell you that as far as I'm concerned, when the President of the Republic unmasked 5 top generals and say, I'm laying it on the line, and 2 of them are going to be charged according to the National Police Commission, and I hope it goes on, that will be a great day in this country, and I'm pretty sure that nobody, including congressmen, senators, or even cabinet members, or governors and mayors who are involved with drugs, will be able to sleep nights, because now people will know that it has been done to the big guys, and therefore it's a time for the poor to have their day in court and to get justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all the senators who participated in the discussion. Majority
Yes,
Leader?
Mr. President, I move to refer the speech of Senator De Lima, Senator Cayetano, and the interpellations to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights and the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, Mr. President. I so move, Mr. President.
There is a motion to refer the privileged speeches of Senators De Lima and Cayetano, as well as the interpellation, to the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Public Order and Dangerous Drugs. Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President.
We recognize Senator
What is the
Ontiveros.
pleasure of Senator Ontiveros?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise on a brief matter of personal and collective privilege by way of reflection on the very first, on the personal collective privilege of the good Senator Cayetano.
There is a motion on the part of Senator Ontiveros to be recognized on a question of personal and collective privilege. Is there any objection? There being none, Senator Ontiveros is recognized.
Salamat po, Mr. President. I believe that the good Senator De Lima is not at all out of line or premature in her personal and collective privilege. Not at all out of line dahil po pinaaalalahanan niya po tayo sa ilang mga mahalagang bagay na posibleng nalilimutan natin in the heat of the moment. And not at all premature dahil kung tama po ang ilang mga bilang ng mga napapatay na nating kababayan at kapwa-tao ay umaabot na po sa 1,000. And if that's not premature, Mr. President, I don't know what is. The criminal justice system po, na dinitalye po ni the good Senator Cayetano, yung mga frustration nating mga kababayan sa dating normal sa criminal justice system, which naman the good Senator Pangilinan worked on a lot sa kanyang pioneering work sa judicial reform kasama ng bantay katarungan. Precisely, Mr. President, yan ang tinukoy din ni the good Senator De Lima, na sa halip ng iba pang paraan na maaaring kasalukuyan na o eventually maging masyadong napaka-madugo at lumalabag na sa karapatang pantao, ituring natin yung ating atensyon sa pagsasaayos ng iba't ibang sangay ng criminal justice system para mas maayos at kumpleto nilang magawa ang kanilang trabaho. Yung Philippine National Police, isa po sa pillars ng ating criminal justice system. And may I say, Mr. President, yan ang isa sa pillars ng criminal justice system na pinakamalapit din sa puso ko. Dahil ang late husband ko, si Frank Barakel, ay naging isang PNP officer din. At kahit po si Chief PNP, Doroy de la Rosa, mista o kaklase sa Philippine Military Academy ng aking late husband at kaibigan ko rin. Kaya I share the concern ng iba't ibang colleagues dito sa Senado, mula kay the good Senator De Lima hanggang kay the good Senator Cayetano at iba pang nagsalita na suportahan ang PNP na gawin ng higit pang maayos ang kanilang trabaho. Lalo na, kahit na at lalo na, sa gitna nitong masalimuot, napakamapanghamon at napakamapanganib na kasalukuyang sitwasyon. Yung sinabi din po ng the good Senator Cayetano na proportionality laos na. Never, Mr. President, may we say that proportionality is passé. Sa ilalim po ng international humanitarian law, ang proportionality ang isa sa last lines of defense para kahit sa panahon ng armadong labanan, hindi maganap ang pinakamasahol na mga crimes against humanity. Kahit po sa law enforcement ng ating kapulisan at iba pang sangay o pillars ng criminal justice system, importante po ang proportionality. Parang nag-iisang mamamayan na binibigyan ng karapatan at proteksyon ng ating saligang batas kapag kaharap ang makapangyarihang estado at ang kanyang armed services ay mayroong pa rin itong karapatang pantao at due process. Proportionality can never be laos, Mr. President. Kung tignan din natin ang karanasan ng Estados Unidos sa ngayon, kung saan naging problema na yung tinatawag nilang police brutality, at ayaw nating umabot sa ganyang antas yung ating sariling Philippine National Police. The Ferguson case, si Michael Brown po, yung African-American na biktima dyan. Michael was fatally shot just for making a grunting sound. He had his hands in the air when he was shot. 2 days ago, sa Amerika pa rin ito, 18-year-old Paul O'Neill was shot to death. He was black and unarmed. Young black men killed in the U.S. by police, umabot na po sa 1,134 deaths sa taong 2015 pa lamang. This is what non-proportionality does. At ayaw na ayaw po nating maging ganyan din po tayo dito sa Pilipinas. Sinabi rin po, konti pa ang pinapatay ngayon. Nakakabahala masyado yung ganyang pananalita. Bagamat kilala ko po ang the good Senator Cayetano sa aming mga personal na pag-uusap, isa sa pinaka-kindest spoken sa mga mambabatas na kilala ko. Pero pag sinabi po natin, konti pa ang pinapatay ngayon, by some counts, umaabot na sa mga 1,000 ang napapatay, hindi po konti iyan. At kahit nga isang tao ang namatay o pinatay na iniisip natin extrajudicially o hanggang sa ngayon ay hindi maipaliwanag, yan po ay sobra. Hindi po yan kulang. Nabanggit ng ang Commission on Human Rights at masaya po ako kasama natin sa gallery ang isang habang buhay na human rights advocate, CCHR Chairman Chito Gascon, nasabi po na malayo na sa tao ang Commission on Human Rights, kalaban ng ilang mga armed services at criminal justice agencies ng ating pamahalaan. Sa tingin ko po, Mr. President, hindi po yan ang sitwasyon ngayon at isa po ang ating institusyon ng Senado upang ipaalala sa ating mga mamamayan kung bakit ang isang constitutional body tulad ng CHR ay kailanman isang kaibigan ng mamamayan at isang partner ng mga executive agencies natin, pati po yung armed services sa ganap na pagganap ng kanilang mga tungkulin sa pinaka-epektibong paraan na laging sinasaalang-alang pa rin ang mga usapin ng karapatang pantao at due process. Yung Internal Affairs Service ng ating PNP, maging tayo sa Senado, o yung IAS, tingin ko ay in their best moments, ma-appreciate pa nga nila ang aksyon ng CHR at maging natin sa Senado kung i-parallel natin sa kanilang efforts, umalam kung ganap na pinatupad ng kanilang mga opisyal at kawani ang kanilang Manual of Operations sa mga kaso na may mga tanong ang ating publiko. Si MJ Pavia po, alam niyo po, Mr. President, si MJ Pavia, pinakaingatan ng kanyang mga magulang na mga kasama natin, Mr. President, nung tayo ay nasa kolehiyo pa, mga magulang niya na mga guro din sa Ateneo High School. Pinakaingatan nila nung panahon ng kanyang burol hanggang kanila siyang inilibing na huwag makulaya ng anumang ibang spekulasyon ang kanyang teribleng pagpatay. Inilayo nila sa anumang usaping pampolitika, sila yung unang nagsabing saan ba nanggaling yung may anggulong robbery dahil hindi po talaga totoo yon. At sa gitna ng kanilang teribleng sakit sa kalooban nila sa nangyari sa kanilang anak, hanggang ngayon wala pa silang anggulo, di nila maintindihan. Sa gitna nito ay nakuha pa nilang sabihin sa kanyang huling misa bago ilibing, salamat sa pagdarasal ninyong lahat para sa aming anak, pero higit pa para sa kanya, sana ipagdasal po ninyong lahat ang ating inang bayan. Dahil sila rin po ay nababahala sa iba't ibang klase ng karahasan na pumapatay sa mga tulad ng kanilang anak, pumapatay sa mga kabataang Filipino, pumapatay sa mga Pilipino. Colombia, Mr. President, ang Colombia ang pinakakulelat na modelo sa anti-crime, anti-drugs campaign in terms of yung aktual na epekto nito sa kanilang lipunan sa usapin ng pagsupil sa problema ng illegal na droga at trafficking. Di tulad po sa Vietnam at Malaysia, di tulad po sa Mexico at Argentina na may mas maayos na pagtimbang sa balanse ng criminalization ng droga at law enforcement laban sa illegal drugs at yung pag-up ng pagpapahalaga nila, pagpapatupad ng harm reduction strategies. Kontra sa mga halimbawang iyan, yung Colombia ang pinakakulelat sa mga bansang iyon. And sad to say, ang nangyayari sa ating bansa sa ngayon na dumarami yung mga extrajudicial o di kaya unexplained killings, yan din po ang naging phenomenon sa Colombia. At ang kanila pong nahihita sa ganyang klasing pamamaraan o pagbibigay daan sa ganyang pamamaraan, wag po sana nating abuting, Mr. President, na lalo lamang napalakas ang kamay ng mga drug cartel na totoong may narco state dyan. Hindi pa tulad dito. at mas maraming tao ay patuloy na nabiktima doon in terms of aktwal na paglabag sa karapatang pantao, masamang epekto sa public health, at pag-diminish sa effectivity ng law enforcement agencies. 13% drop in crimes. Paki-disaggregate po natin yan. May 13% drop in crimes po ba sa drug-related crimes? May 13% drop po ba sa murders o killings? Mukhang hindi po, ganyan ang statistic. May 30 o di kaya may 13% drop po ba sa ibang index and non-index crimes? I would hazard to guess, Mr. President, na dahil sa criminalization and yung violence-laden nature ng nagiging tugon sa ating kasalukuyang illegal drugs problem, in fact, ay tumataas pa ang krimen sa ating bansa. Last reflection, Mr. President, bleeding hearts and human rights. Mr. President, just as sana masabi natin na di kailanman ginamit ang karapatang pantao bilang shield o excuse para wasakin ang ating bansa, hinding-hindi rin po bleeding hearts lamang ang pagiging human rights advocates nating lahat. Bleeding hearts po, simpleng sentimentality. Napakadaling pong gawin yan. No risk po. Hindi po humihingi ng malaking pagtataya mula sa atin. Pero ang ginagawa po ng CHR, ang ginagawa po nating lahat ng mga human rights advocates, ang ginagawa po ng mga pamilyang naghihingi ng paliwanag sa hindi maipaliwanag na pagpatay ng kanilang mga mahal sa buhay. Yan po ay isa ring sa kabila ng lungkot at galit nila, sa kabila ng takot at pangamba natin, yan po ay isang napaka-practical na usapin, Mr. President. Dahil gusto po nating ayusin ang law enforcement sa ating bansa, gusto po nating magkaroon ng isang multi-perspective approach para sugpuin ang ating seryosong problema sa illegal drugs and trafficking para hindi tayo umabot sa pagiging narco-state dahil hindi pa tayo nearing narco-state. At gusto po natin, Mr. President, ilaan sa ating mga kababayan ang mga usapin kasama nitong maayos na law enforcement, kasama ng pagtaguyod ng karapatang pantao, lahat pa po ng public goods na hinahanap ng ating mga mamamayan, kasama na po yung universal healthcare. Maraming salamat po, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Ontiveros. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we refer the manifestations of or the speech of the lady from Akbayan to the Committee on Justice and Committee on Public Order.
To the same committees. There's a motion to refer the privileged speech of Senator Ontiveros to the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Public Order and Dangerous Drugs. Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, I'll try to make this as brief as possible. There are some housekeeping we need to do, as requested by the other members of the Senate. So, Mr. President, for the Committee on Science and Technology, I move that Senator Lagarda replace Senator Kiko Pangilinan as member.
There is a motion to replace Senator Kiko Pangilinan with Senator Legarda as member in the Committee on Science and Technology. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
For the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, Mr. President, there were over two members in the membership. So I move that this is cleared with Senator Lacson. I move that we remove Senator Hontiveros and Senator Escudero as members of the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
There is a motion to remove the names of Senators Ontiveros and Escudero from the membership of the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. As requested by Senator Bam Aquino, Chair of the Committee on Science and Technology, after conferring with the Chair of the Committee on Trade, Senator Subiri, so with the consent of the body, I move that we switch the primary and secondary referral of Senate Bill 175 from the Committee on Trade to the Committee on Science and Technology and vice versa. So move, Mr. President.
What is the vice versa, Majority Leader?
Senate Bill 175, from the Committee on Trade as primary to secondary, and Committee on Science and Technology from secondary to primary.
Okay, so there is a motion to make the Committee on Science and Technology the primary committee as far as Senate Bill number 175 is concerned,
Yes.
and the Committee on Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship as the secondary committee. Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, as requested by Senator Aquino, Committee on Science and Technology, after conferring with the Chair of the Committee on Public Services, Senator Poe, I move that we switch the primary and secondary referral of Senate Bill 171 from the Committee on Public Services to the Committee on Science and Technology, and likewise vice versa. Science Technology as primary and secondary for Committee on Public Services.
Yes, okay. There is a motion to make the Committee on Science and Technology as the primary committee as far as Senate Bill number 171 is concerned, and the Committee on Public Services as the secondary committee. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
By the way, these motions that I have been doing, Mr. President, was cleared also by Senator Aquino and the other chairman with the bills and index. Mr. President, Senator Legarda, Chair of the Committee on Climate Change, requests to replace one member in the committee. After conferring with the senators, I move to replace Senator Bam Aquino with Senator Pampilo Lacson as member of the Committee on Climate Change.
There is a motion to replace Senator Bam Aquino with Senator Panfilo Lacson as member of the Committee on Climate Change. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Trillanes, Chair of the Committee on Civil Service, requests to replace one member in the said committee. He has confirmed with the concerned senators. I move to replace Senator J.B. Ercito with Senator Legarda as Chairman of the Committee on Civil Service.
As member, yes.
As member.
There is a motion to replace Senator J.B. Ercito with Senator
Senator Legarda.
Loren Legarda as member in the Committee on Civil Service. Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Right, Mr. President, just three more. With the permission of the body, I move that we continue with the organization of the various standing committees. There are only 3 committees that we will do today, Mr. President. So move.
There is a motion to continue with the reorganization of our standing committees. Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we constitute the Committee on Foreign Relations and elect Senator Alan Peter Cayetano as chairman, and members Villar, Angara, Honasan, Gordon, Villanueva, Pacquiao, Zubiri, Gatchalian, Ejercito, Pangilinan, Hontiveros, and Aquino for the majority. And for the minority, automatic, Escudero and Trillanes, Mr. President.
There is a motion to constitute the Committee on Foreign Relations with Senator Alan Cayetano as chairman and the other senators named as either vice chairman or members thereof. Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved and the Committee on Foreign Relations is so constituted.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to constitute the favorite committee of Senator Honasan, Committee on Peace, with Chairperson Honasan as the chairman, and members Lacson, Legarda, Binay, Pacquiao, Zubiri, and Peace. Escudero as minority representative. So move, Mr. President.
There is a motion to constitute the Committee on Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation with Senator Honasan as the chairman and the other senators named either as vice chairman or members thereof. Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved and the Committee on Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation is so constituted.
And finally, Mr. President, I move that we constitute the Committee on Cultural Communities with Senator Nancy Binay as chairman, vice chairman Senator Legarda, members Hontiveros, Pacquiao, Villanueva, Honasan, and Senator Trillanes for the minority.
There is a motion to constitute the Committee on Cultural Communities with Senator Binay as the chairperson and the other senators named as either vice chairman or members thereof. Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved and the Committee on Cultural Communities is so constituted.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, August 3, 2016.
Is there any objection? There being none, the session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, August 3, 2016.